Chapter 1672. After passing through 3 mountains and 6 rivers, the carriage finally returned to Jade Gate Pass. This wasn't an accurate statement, but it was fine as long as one understood the meaning and didn't nitpick. Yang Fanzhan and the old exalted Jin Shun both let out sighs of relief, a relieved smile on their faces. If the two in the carriage really had some other goal, they definitely wouldn't have waited until now. In other words, since they had smoothly arrived at the pass, there was a high chance they were safe. Yang Fanzhan turned and asked the two in the carriage what they thought. After obtaining a definite answer, his smile became even more relaxed. Without stopping, the carriage arrived at the pass. This was different from entering the central wasteland divine continent. To enter the western wasteland, one didn't need any identification and could leave at any time. It was time to part ways. Yang Fanzhan was thoughtful. He said that after they left, the two of them would need transportation, so he left the carriage behind. Qin Yu smiled in acceptance. Looking at the tightly shut carriage door, Yang Fanzhan said, "Madam, are you tired from the long journey? Then I will bid my farewells here." Yang Fanzhan, come up. Misty's voice suddenly sounded out from the carriage. The old exalted Jin Shun's heart tightened. Beside him, Yang Fanzhan also revealed an unnatural expression. He looked at Qin Yu. "Don't worry, I'm fine." Although Qin Yu didn't know why Misty had called him up, it clearly wasn't to kill him. There was no need to do so, and no need to go through so much trouble. Yang Fanzhan took a deep breath. "Yes, madam." He thought about refusing, but before he could even think about it, he pressed it down. He pushed open the door and boarded the carriage. Yang Fanzhan didn't dare to sit down. He respectfully stood where he was. Misty looked at him. "The reason we cooperated with you before was because you were our target from the start. That was why we met at the roadside pavilion." Beads of sweat dripped down Yang Fanzhan's forehead. He didn't dare to nod or shake his head. Although he hadn't interacted with this madam much, he could sum up his feelings towards her. She was deep and unfathomable. To play the fool in front of her was the true fool. "I called you up because there is something I need you to complete." Moments later, Yang Fanzhan respectfully withdrew from the carriage. Between his eyebrows, there was an unconcealable joy. As he thought about what the madam had instructed him to do, he felt as if he were in a dream. Even the pain of handing over the jade card completely vanished. What's more, there was an extra harvest this time. Qin Yu glanced at him, a bit surprised. But he didn't say anything. He cupped his hands together and said, "Congratulations, Sir Yang." Yang Fanzhan hurriedly returned the greeting and repeatedly expressed his gratitude before taking his leave. Qin Yu watched as the two of them hurried to the pass. Then, he thought for a moment and jumped onto the carriage. "Where are we going now?" Little Misty's voice was calm. "Immortal Inquisition Tower." Qin Yu's eyebrows shot up. He had already gone to a place once and left disappointed. So why would he want to go back again? However, although little Misty's voice sounded very calm, he was able to detect a trace of complexity. He was extremely smart and didn't hesitate to kill his own curiosity. Qin Yu didn't say anything else. He pulled on the reins and drove the carriage away. An hour later, the carriage stopped at the bottom of the Immortal Seeking Tower. Before Qin Yu could speak, the car door opened on its own and little Misty stepped out. She looked up at the Immortal Seeking Tower in front of her and frowned. She didn't enter. Instead, she turned and walked to a wine stall by the side of the Immortal Seeking Tower. At this time, there weren't many customers. Besides her, there were only a few people at 2 other tables. The boss patted a dozing waiter and had him hurry over to greet them. "Guest, please sit down. What wine would you like to drink?" "What we sell here is the local wine of Jade Gate Pass. The taste is sweet and the price is fair. We definitely won't disappoint you." The waiter braced himself, and his words were sharp and eloquent. Qin Yu tied the reins and walked into the wine shop. He glanced at little Misty's face and said, "Give me 2 jugs of your best wine, as well as a few side dishes to go with it." 3 jugs. The waiter looked at Qin Yu. Qin Yu nodded. "I'll listen to her." "Very well. Please wait a moment. 2 guests. It will be coming soon." The waiter shouted and turned to leave. The boss scooped up a ladle of water and washed his hands before starting to cut vegetables. Soon, 3 jugs of wine as well as 4 side dishes, both meat and vegetable, were neatly placed on the table. The waiter smiled and said that the guests should enjoy themselves. Then, he retreated to his original position. Not long after, he began to doze off again. The boss frowned, but seeing that no customers were preparing to come in, he didn't call out to him. Little Meaty opened a jug of wine and poured herself a cup of wine. She slowly drank 2 mouthfuls. Chinyu felt that this wine was very ordinary, let alone comparing it with the wine fruit. Even the god's nectar of the nearby Immortal Seeking Tower was much better. But Little Meaty drank it very earnestly. This made Chinyu feel that it was a heavy portion. This was the first time that he had seen Little Meaty so worried. He didn't know why. At this time, Little Meaty suddenly said, "I'm here." Chinyu's heart chilled. He slowly turned around and discovered that a young scholar had appeared at their table at some unknown time. This was a true scholar. It wasn't because of his temperament, nor was it because he wore scholarly robes. Rather, it was because he held a yellowing book in his hand that had been carefully maintained. In his other hand was a rolled-up painting tube. Before Little Meaty spoke, Chinyu hadn't sensed anything at all. Even now, when he closed his eyes, he still couldn't sense that there was a person standing so close to him. This caused a dignified expression to appear on his face. The scholar smiled and cupped his hands together. "I finally see you again." As he spoke, tears streamed down his face. After bowing, he stood up and placed the book and painting tube on the table. The scholar looked at Chinyu and smiled. "My current state is a bit strange, so you can't sense my aura. It's not that I have the ability to conceal myself from your perception." Chinyu nodded. "Thank you for telling me." The scholar smiled and wiped away his tears. "You don't like these things the most. I was wrong, so I will punish myself with a cup first." As he spoke, he turned and sat down. He picked up a jar of wine and poured himself a bowl. Then he raised it to Little Meaty and drank it all in one gulp. Little Meaty thought for a moment and then picked up the bowl of wine to drink as well. With just a single sip, the scholar couldn't help but wipe his eyes again. He forced a smile and said, "I've really let you see a joke. It's just that when I think about being able to sit at the same table and drink with you today, I find it hard to contain my excitement." Little Meaty said, "No matter how much I say, there's nothing I can do about your current situation." The scholar waved his hand. "I wouldn't dare to have such an extravagant request. To be able to see you again is already more than enough for me." He filled his bowl with wine and drank it all in one gulp. He carefully wiped his hands and then placed the yellowed book in front of Little Meaty. "The gift you gave me in the past, today it shall be returned to its rightful owner. Jiang Huan's talent is slow, and I have never been able to comprehend the final step. I have truly failed to live up to your expectations. I am ashamed. Little Meaty was silent for a moment. Then, she slowly said, "This book is incomplete to begin with. For you to be able to cultivate to this step has already surpassed my expectations." She glanced at the book in Jiang Huan's hands. Chinyu hesitated. But at this time, Jiang Huan had already placed the book in front of him without hesitation. He smiled and said, "To be able to follow at your side, I envy you very much." Chinyu thought that this was indeed a matter that left one envious. So he smiled and nodded. After receiving the book, he didn't flip through it, but placed it beside him. Jiang Huan's smile became even more relaxed, as if he had accomplished something that had been weighing on his mind. He thought for a moment and picked up the painting tube next to him. "This is a portrait I made from my memories after you left. Don't worry, Jiang Huan has never allowed an outsider to see it. Now that I'm about to leave, I dare to admit to this matter in front of you. I'll leave the painting to you. You can decide how to deal with it." After saying this, Jiang Huan poured himself a third bowl of wine, drank it, and put it down. He stood up and bowed respectfully to Little Meat. "If there's an afterlife, I hope to see you again." He turned around and walked away. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Then, as if a shadow, Jiang Huan vanished into thin air, vanishing into thin air. Just like when he arrived, he was completely silent and didn't make the slightest sound. From the beginning to the end, the arrival and departure of the scholar Jiang Huan The people in the wine shop didn't seem to notice anything at all. Little Meaty picked up the bowl of wine in front of her and drained it in one gulp. She got up and walked out. Chinyu paid the bill. After a moment of hesitation, he picked up the painting tube and followed her out of the wine shop. Little Meaty didn't board the carriage. Instead, she walked along the street. Chinyu spoke to the innkeeper and had them look after the carriage. After a long period of silence, Little Meaty suddenly said, "Many years ago, Jiang Huan was someone I accidentally entered the central desolate divine continent and met an old friend." Chinyu nodded earnestly. He was well aware of the attitude that Little Meaty had shown towards the world. For her to call him an old friend was already extraordinary. Back then, he also opened a wine shop. The wine he sold was very good. I stayed in his shop for about a month. Afterwards, I left him a book as money for the wine I bought and left. Until today, we met again. The simpler it was said, the more complicated the matter was. Chinyu couldn't help but think, could it be that between these two, there was once, cough cough, it didn't look alike. Little Meaty turned around, her eyes calm. "Chinyu, do you want to die?" Chinyu shook his head. His words were direct and efficient, without any hesitation. "Humph." Little Meaty coldly snorted. "In terms of cultivation talent, you are far worse than Jiang Huan. Out of all the people I have ever seen, he is the one with the most cultivation talent." She paused for a moment and continued, "Keep that book well. Although it is incomplete, the things recorded are very good. Jiang Huan has already walked more than half the road. If you try again, the difficulty will be much lower." Chinyu's attitude was proper. "I will remember." Little Meaty stopped. She let out a deep breath. "You can deal with what happens next. I am tired, so I will return to the carriage and wait for you." She turned and vanished. Several breaths of time later, Immortal Seeking Tower's shopkeeper Lu appeared in front of Chinyu. His eyes were red, revealing an unconcealable sadness. His voice was a bit hoarse. Before the tower master left, he passed down orders that Immortal Seeking Tower was a property he managed on behalf of that young miss. In the future, the young miss will deal with it as she pleases. Chin had already guessed Jiang Huan's identity, so he wasn't surprised to hear this. He thought for a moment and said, "I understand, but I cannot be sure whether or not she will accept it. But I will help the shopkeeper pass on the message." Shopkeeper Lu revealed a grateful expression. "Thank you, sir." He took out a token made from an unknown material and offered it with both hands. "This token represents the Tower Master's identity. I ask that you pass it on to him." Chinyu hesitated for a moment. He nodded and received it. "I will." Shopkeeper Lu bowed and left, his back incomparably bleak. In his life, the Tower Master he had always respected had completely vanished tonight. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel regret. Should he have told the Tower Master that he had discovered the true God's nectar? Otherwise, things wouldn't have reached this step. Thinking of this, his heart became increasingly heavy and sad. Chinyu traced the unknown material token in his hand. Subconsciously, the figure of that scholar appeared in his mind. Although he had only seen him once, and it had only been a moment, and he had cried several times, he always felt that he was a very different person. This was likely because of the high evaluation that Little Meaty had given him. But today, such a character had completely vanished in a thin air in a wine shop on the side of the street. How could it be said? This had left a psychological impact on Chinyu. Chinyu sighed inwardly and turned to leave. But just as he was about to turn, he stopped. On the other side of the street, a young girl was holding a lantern. As the light illuminated her face, her two long eyebrows made her seem even more gentle and amiable. Chinyu hesitated for a moment. He cupped his hands together and smiled from afar. Then he turned and left. Chapter 1673. The carriage left the city. Within the carriage, Meaty's voice echoed out. "Since we meet again, that means you are fated. Do you not want to say a few more words?" Chinyu lightly said, "There are many fates in this world. Some are deep, some are shallow, some are long, some are far. Since I do not wish to be stained by them, that means my fate is shallow. It is better to sever it as soon as possible." After a brief silence, Meaty humphed. What a twisted logic. Chinyu smiled. He could sense that in truth, Meaty was very satisfied with his performance. And at this time, sitting in the carriage, Meaty glanced back, a sharp light flashing in her eyes. The arrangements were almost complete. As long as this great general Zhao Yuan of the Qin Empire didn't have an undeserved reputation, he should be able to sense something. For the next several days, the journey was calm and tranquil until the carriage arrived at the base of Fighting Bull Mountain. Qin pulled on the reins. He looked at the center of the road in front of him and saw a black-clothed, middle-aged man leaning on his sword. His pupils shrank, and he immediately became vigilant. Very strong. This person stood in front of him, releasing an invisible aura that disturbed the net between the heavens and earth. This caused a small area to be filled with chaos, making it difficult to sense anything. Before Qin could speak, the black-clothed man said, "The monster soul at the base of Fighting Bull Mountain was taken by you too, right? I'm very curious as to how you managed to accomplish this." As he spoke, a cold aura broke out from his body, covering the world. It was like thousands of invisible blades were circling in the air. They could fall down at any moment, destroying everything within range. Jade Gate Pass, Great General Zhao Yuan. There was no need for any reason. The moment Qin Yu felt this wild sword aura, he was able to determine this person's identity. His heart shrank. The situation he worried about the most had finally occurred. But Meaty had given him a guarantee that nothing would happen. Was Meaty wrong in her judgment, or was there some other reason? If you won't speak, then I will have no choice but to personally try. Zhao Yuan stepped forwards. With a dull thud, a wild pressure descended, falling 3 feet into the sky. The carriage was instantly torn apart and Meaty flew out. She lifted a hand and smashed apart the covering strength, landing in front of Qin Yu. "Great General Zhao Yuan, we are only passing through Jade Gate Pass. We have no intention of being enemies with you, so please do not be so overbearing." Qin Yu couldn't help but reveal a look of surprise. He never thought Meaty would say such words. It was true. It wasn't Meaty at all. No, it should be get lost or die. This was Meaty's style. What was going on? Qin Yu felt vexed. Didn't you say you could tell me if there was anything? Why do I feel like my head is still full of fog? Don't talk, just listen. It's not time for you to appear yet. The Meaty sound echoed in his ears. Qin Yu quickly drew back and lowered his head, not speaking. "Whatever you say." Zhao Yuan squinted his eyes, and his lips curled into a smile. "Such a strong cultivation. I'm even more curious about your identities now." However, it was at this moment that he suddenly frowned and stopped attacking. His eyes were fixed on the flesh, and a serious expression appeared on his face. What a powerful sword aura. Majestic, vast, and vaguely gave him a feeling of being suppressed. Other than that, there was a hint of familiarity, as if he had seen this sword breath somewhere before. Zhao Yuan felt threatened. Little Meaty said in a low voice, "Great General Zhao Yuan, we were indeed the ones who took the demon soul here. We are willing to pay compensation." This straightforward and direct tone of voice, the familiar feeling in Zhao Yuan's heart became even more intense. He looked at Little Meaty and then at Qin Yu, who was being protected behind him. The surprise that had appeared on his face just now hadn't escaped Zhao Yuan's eyes. With the cry of a sword, trillions of sword phantoms instantly appeared. They howled towards the other side like a vast tide. Little Meaty frowned. She lifted a hand and pointed forwards. The trillions of sword phantoms were cut apart, and Zhao Yuan was sent flying backwards. He looked down at the black robes on his chest, and a sharp light surged in his eyes. Heaven-splitting sword sect. Zhao Yuan suddenly lifted his hand and crossed his arms. He spread out his fingers and placed his palms in front of him and behind him, making a strange gesture. Little Meaty's complexion changed, and an icy, cold, killing intent appeared. Zhao Yuan's lips curled up. Killing people to silence them is indeed a good method, but this is Jade Gate Pass. Do you really think you can kill me? Even if I use my trump card as a Tao protector, I am confident I can escape. At that time, all that awaits you is death. Little Meaty took a deep breath. Great General, what do you want? Zhao Yuan lightly said. The heaven-splitting sword sect has been destroyed for 10,000 years, but they still have a Tao protector to pass on their legacy. I find this hard to believe, so what I want to do can wait. He clapped his hands. There was the sound of breaking air as several army masters flew over. According to the rules of the Central Desolate, once a sect returns to the divine continent and their identity is exposed, they must accept the challenge of a Tao-seeking battle. I have a disciple under me. As long as you can win, I can guarantee that nothing about today will be revealed. Little Meaty turned her head and glanced at Qinyu. Good, we agree. Zhao Yuan smiled. I like straightforward people. Zhao Heng, come and fight. One of the young armored soldiers stepped forward and respectfully nodded. He turned and locked his eyes on a Qinyu, an icy cold aura swirling in them. Don't ask so many questions. When you attack, use your strongest method and slaughter this little brat of the army. Qinyu wanted to rub his eyebrows. Why did she suddenly want to go all out? But Little Meaty definitely had her reasons for doing this. He stepped forwards. Zhao Heng, the armored soldier across from him, said in a low voice. Heaven-splitting sword sect, Qinyu. As for who the hell the heaven-splitting sword sect was, only a ghost knew. Bang! A sword instantly left its sheath. Like a river of stars, it slashed down from above. There was nothing fancy about it, only a dense sword aura that seemed to condense into essence, filled with slaughter and destruction. Qinyu's thoughts stirred. The world rules instantly twisted, forming a small world that covered both sides. Before this, Little Meaty had already reminded him to use his strongest method to kill. Right now, his strongest method was to transform into the heavens fake in this small world. As Zhao Yuan saw this, his eyes brightened. There was no longer any doubt in his heart. Stop, we admit defeat. Since he really was a descendant of the heaven-splitting sword sect and had even cultivated the outline of a small world, there was no reason to continue. Even though Zhao Heng was suppressed within the small world, he didn't stop. He roared out loud, and his eyes turned crimson. Tiny cracks split open on his exposed flesh, and blood dyed his entire body red. What was also dyed red was the sword he slashed out. The cruel and slaughter aura rose by more than 10 times. Zhao Yuan frowned. He stepped forwards, but before his feet could touch the ground, he was forced back. Little Meaty stared at him, her eyes hard and cold. In the next moment, there was a dull thud that resounded in everyone's ears. Zhao Heng's headless corpse fell to the ground with a bang, blood spraying far into the distance. Between the heavens and earth, a chaotic and tyrannical sword intent swept through the world like a hurricane. Poochie 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 tore through the earth, leaving behind countless mottled marks. A trace of this sword intent was like a cool breeze that illuminated the world, vast and boundless. Great General Zhao Yuan was expressionless. He glanced at Zhao Heng's corpse and slowly said, "He is my disciple and also my son. Moreover, I already admitted defeat just now." Qinyu wouldn't explain this matter. Since Little Meaty wanted him to kill someone and he didn't stop her just now, then he would just kill him. As for whether or not Zhao Heng deserved to die, this was a question that should be asked to his honorable master and father Zhao Yuan. It had nothing to do with him. After all, in that situation just now, if it were someone with a lower cultivation, they would have already been torn to pieces by Zhao Heng's sword. It wasn't as if you could kill someone and others couldn't kill you. There was no such reasoning in this world. Moreover, Qinyu had left Zhao Heng's corpse half intact. That was already quite good. Little Meaty was expressionless. Her eyes were icy cold. Great General, you should know the rules of the Tao-seeking battle. Since both sides have chosen to fight, they must stake their lives on the line. There is no possibility of giving up halfway. Otherwise, Great General, you will be the greatest humiliation to my heaven-splitting sword sect. Even if there are only a few people left in the sword sect, I don't mind dying together with Great General. Dying together? Zhao Yuan had a dangerous look in his eyes. With just you? Do you really think I have no way to kill you here? Rumble, rumble, the earth shook and rumbled. Countless black silhouettes of an army appeared at the ends of one's line of sight, their killing intent soaring into the heavens. As long as the great general gave the order, they would rush forwards. Zhao Yuan coldly sneered. I once lost 30% of my armored army to successfully kill a half-emperor realm great monster. Do you think I would dare to give the order to destroy your heaven-splitting sword sect's final inheritance, no matter the cost? Little Meaty took a step forwards. Above her head, a dreadful sword aura erupted, condensing into a 1,000-foot-long sword phantom. She locked onto Zhao Yuan, her eyes becoming increasingly cold. There was no fear or retreat in them. Great General, can you give a try? This was a naked threat. I can naturally cut off my sword sect's inheritance, but before I die, I will drag Great General Zhao Yuan down with me. Arrogant and fierce. As long as there was reason, then there was nothing to fear in the heavens and earth. This was really like the heaven-splitting sword sect. If it weren't for this, then the once famous sword sect of the Central Barren Divine continent wouldn't have offended so many people that no one would help them in the great calamity, causing the sect to decline and eventually perish. Zhao Yuan diabolically grinned. In his life, what he hated the most was being threatened by others. Others might not dare to risk their lives to take another's life, but he wasn't afraid. Moreover, even after doing so many times, he was still alive and kicking. As for those people who had risked their lives against him in the past, each and every one of them had already become bones in a grave. Shua, a Taoist, appeared from thin air, standing between the two. He smiled and said, "It is said that no discord, no concord. There is no need to be so angry." Zhao Yuan frowned. Lord Imperial Scholar hasn't left yet. The great Qin Imperial Scholar was known as the person most trusted by the great emperor. Even though he heard these rude words, he didn't reveal the least bit of anger. He originally left, but halfway there, he sensed some movement and hurried back. There, he saw a Tao-seeking battle. He looked at Zhao Yuan. There are some old rules that we must abide by. You provoked a Tao-seeking battle on your own initiative, so if you die, you can only blame your own lack of skill. Great General Zhao Yuan, do you think my words are correct? Zhao Yuan coldly snorted. The Imperial Scholar smiled. Young people were often hot-tempered. He couldn't lower himself to their level. Moreover, that undying old fart from the Zhao family was a bit difficult to deal with. After killing his favorite grandson, he would definitely go all out. How troublesome. He turned to look at Little Meaty. The Imperial Scholar's eyes brightened. Senior, it shouldn't be wrong for me to call you that. After all, although you look young, you aren't young at all. Qin, you couldn't help but look up at the Imperial Scholar. The Imperial Scholar turned his head, a kind smile on his face. Look, this little brother here agrees with my words. Qin, your uncle, if you want to die, then don't drag me down with you. Little brother, cursing others is not right. Even if you can't help it, if you really want to curse, you should hide it well. Otherwise, if I see through you like this, how awkward would that be? Qin thought for a moment. He cupped his hands together and said, I thank Lord Imperial Scholar for the reminder. Apex. Chapter 1674. You have good manners, and you know your mistakes. Not bad. The Imperial Scholar smiled. He glanced at Zhao Yuan. The great general had a cold expression and pretended not to notice. Little Meaty returned the greeting. Greetings, Imperial Scholar. You aren't young anymore. The Imperial Scholar smiled and nodded. That's right. That is why it shows how high your seniority is. He paused for a moment and then sighed. The heaven-splitting sword sect has already perished for over 10,000 years, and yet there is a day they can make a comeback. Their background is indeed deep. Moreover, their luck is good to find such a suitable inheritor for their teachings. Their future is bright. Little Meaty said, I thank Lord Imperial Scholar's auspicious words. The battle of Tao seeking has ended. If there is nothing else, we will be leaving first. The Imperial Scholar smiled and nodded. Of course, I am only a spectator and have no intention of interfering. I believe that great General Zhao Yuan will keep his word, right? Zhao Yuan's face darkened. I will order everything that happened today to be sealed. Not a single word of it will be leaked out. Little Meaty turned and pulled on Chinyu. Let's go. She raised a hand and slashed forward. Space was torn open and the two of them stepped in, vanishing from sight. The Imperial Scholar sighed. In the past, the Heaven-Splitting Sword Sect was known as one of the strongest sword sects in the world. There's a reason for that. This sword breath is indeed incomparably sharp. Great General Zhao Yuan's complexion was still indifferent, but it was no longer as gloomy and cold as before. This was because this was originally just a play. He just never imagined that the Imperial Scholar would change the script at the last minute and release those two from the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect. This left him dissatisfied. He turned and cupped his hands together. Lord Imperial Scholar, I ask that you give me an explanation for this matter. Within Swallow Mountain, although the ruins of the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect had been visited for many years, there were still many places that hadn't revealed their true appearance. Ignoring everything else, as long as he could capture these two people and take a trip to Swallow Mountain, he would definitely have a tremendous harvest. Moreover, this wasn't all. In the past, the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect had suffered a great calamity and was forcefully knocked down from a top sword sect to its current state. This was all because of that clan. Now, the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect had risen from the ashes. Since a Tao Protector and a Tao Inheritor had returned to the Central Desolate Land, there would definitely be great waves. If he could take control of it, he might be able to reap some benefits. At the very least, His Majesty would be very satisfied with this matter. Zhao Yuan had intended to use this matter to repair the bad impression he had left in His Majesty's heart, but it seemed like it was all for naught. The Imperial teacher's expression was calm. Hearing this, he smiled and raised a finger. There are two reasons. First, this Heaven-Splitting Sword sect's Tao Protector is very strong. As for how strong he is, I can't be sure, but he is definitely much stronger than what the general sensed. If we insist on keeping them here, we might end up in a life and death struggle. This is not the outcome this old man wishes to see. The second reason is that the successor of the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect really does have great talent, so great that I can't help but want to take him as my disciple. Just now, when he killed Zhao Heng, you saw it with your own eyes. The small world already has a preliminary outline. Such a character already has the qualifications to become a chess piece. Since he is a chess piece, he should be placed on the chessboard. Hiding him in a pocket would be useless. The Imperial teacher glanced at Zhao Yuan and smiled. Great General, rest assured that I will naturally explain this matter to His Majesty and also say a few words for you. After all, the reason we were able to smoothly discover that the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect had returned to the Central Desolate Divine Continent is all thanks to General's meticulous thinking. Zhao Yuan's complexion relaxed. He cupped his hands together and said, Then I'll have to trouble the Imperial teacher. I will bid my farewells. He glanced at the headless corpse on the ground. With a flick of his sleeves, sword intent swept out, instantly turning the corpse into powder that dyed the ground red. Whoosh! Zhao Yuan shot into the skies, several army masters following behind him. The Imperial teacher looked at the corpse that Zhao Yuan had smashed apart and sighed inwardly. Otherwise, it would have been nice to obtain it and refine it. He looked up at the place where Little Meaty and Chinyu had left. He thought for a moment and mumbled, Heaven-Splitting Sword sect. Although seeing is believing, I still have to investigate this matter. There is no harm in being cautious. As he spoke, he took a step backwards and vanished into thin air. His field of vision flashed. When Chinyu's vision recovered, he had arrived at a roadside pavilion. This place was very familiar. It was here that they had waited for Yang Fanzhan to take the bait. If they continued forwards, they would have left the range of the Jade Gate Pass. Little Meaty let go and sat down. She took out a fruit from somewhere and bit into it. With a loud crunch, juice splashed out. Chinyu was expressionless. Little Meaty glared at him. Oh, our young Master Chin. It seems you're angry? Chinyu nodded. Let me add that I'm very angry. Little Meaty narrowed her eyes. Then tell me, what should I do to make our young Master Chin not so angry? Chinyu coughed. Do as you see fit. Little Meaty continued to eat fruit. She ate fruit after fruit. Just as Chinyu was about to break down, she suddenly smiled. Chinyu, I think you really don't know what's good for you. Then I asked Miss Little Meaty to give me some pointers so that I know just why I don't know what's good for me. Don't try to force me with words. It's useless. Little Meaty mocked. You don't need to play any tricks on me. I was going to tell you anyway. Chinyu quickly turned around. He gestured with a hand, indicating that he was all ears. Little Meaty lightly said, after entering the Central Desolate, you will need a public identity that can be recognized. Otherwise, those people that appear out of nowhere will often have miserable fates the more glorious they are. As for the reason, think about it. In the other desolate regions outside of the Central Desolate, if you have to be careful and rely on others, do you think they will try to do something? Then, do you understand? Chinyu thought for a moment and slowly nodded. This wasn't something that was too difficult to understand. Little Meaty snapped her fingers. So, starting from today, you're a successor of the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect. She thought for a moment. Zhao Yuan isn't too much of a problem, but that old Taoist isn't easy to fool. I fear he will investigate a little more. Luckily, I made preparations ahead of time. I guarantee that the more he investigates, the more convinced he will be. Chinyu rubbed his eyebrows. That's it. You should at least explain in detail. For instance, if I, the so-called successor of the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect, don't know anything about my own sect, wouldn't that be easily seen through? Moreover, you must have a reason for choosing the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect as your cover, right? It can't be that you just randomly chose a shell. The first matter is something you don't need to know right now. According to the rules of the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect, only when you reopen the Ancestral Hall will you have the qualifications to know the inside story of the sect. But don't worry, since I have forged an identity, then it will be the complete set. There won't be any problems. As she spoke, she took out a token. This was the token that Yang Fanshan had given them as a reward. Take this. Now, your identity as the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect is set in stone. Little Meaty looked at Chinyu. As for the second matter, your guess is correct. The destruction of the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect in the past was all thanks to that clan. With this identity, everything you do in the future will become logical and no one will think too much about it. Moreover, you might even be able to obtain some additional assistance. In the Central Desolate Lands, there are many people who dislike that clan. For instance, the Imperial Scholar represents the great emperor of the Qin Empire. Chinyu shook his head. I think there are other reasons. Little Meaty coldly sneered. Young man, don't think too much about it. It's easy to go bald if you use your brain too much. She stood up. Carrying Big Sister, your time for answering questions is over. We should hurry on our way. Chinyu bitterly smiled. It seemed that he wouldn't be able to ask anything today, but for better or worse he did learn some things. But as he thought about what happened today, Little Meaty had deliberately set up a trap. She had drawn Great General Zhao Yuan and even the Imperial Scholar into her trap, allowing them to see through their identity as the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect. But before this, he hadn't noticed anything at all. Chinyu couldn't help but rub his nose. Who knew how many more things she was hiding in the dark? The two soon arrived at Song City. This time, what they needed to find was a large ferry that passed through the various regions. Song City was far too small and didn't have the qualifications for a large ferry to stop at. But this place could be used as a transit point to reach a place where a large ferry stopped. Moreover, they could inquire about the route ahead of time. After staying in Song City for 2 days, a ferry docked at the pier. Chinyu ordered the inn's servant to keep an eye on the ferry. Soon, he received a reply that the ferry would depart tomorrow. After a period of sailing, it would arrive at the main city of the Langya region. The main city was bustling with activity, and there would be large ferries passing by. As for whether or not they could find a suitable ferry, they would have to ask around. The two didn't hesitate. After buying tickets, they boarded the ferry. Without the rich Yang Fanshan, they could only choose an ordinary ferry room. Luckily, the location was decent and the view was good. And as Chinyu and Little Meaty boarded the ferry, Wei Han, who had been detained for many days in the Jade Gate Pass barracks, was finally released. Before this, he had been interrogated by a Taoist. This Taoist had a gentle attitude and only smiled as he asked several questions. What startled Wei Han was that he couldn't resist the other party's questions at all. It seemed that as long as he spoke, the other party would give him a truthful answer. Even though Wei Han had obtained permission before this, he still felt his mind tremble. He vaguely guessed the Taoist's identity. Wei Han didn't dare to stay any longer. He hit his tracks and left Jade Gate Pass. In a mortal-seeking pavilion, the Imperial Scholar drank a bowl of wine and felt much more at ease. Through interrogating Wei Han, he was able to further confirm that the two people were from the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect. After all, many years ago, the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect's method of breaking the sword and rebuilding it could be said to have been famous for a time. After drinking another bowl of wine, the Imperial Scholar stood up and beckoned. When the restaurant servant came over, he smiled and said, "I'll have to trouble you to invite Manager Liu over. Tell him that this humble Taoist has some matters to discuss with him." The servant looked at the smiling Taoist and felt a bit apprehensive. His face paled, and he quickly nodded. Soon, Manager Liu rushed over. When he saw the Taoist at the table, his complexion changed. Before he could bow, the Taoist stopped him with a look. "There is something I want to confirm with Manager Liu. You cannot lie to me." Manager Liu walked to the side and respectfully said, "If you have any matters, I will tell you everything I know." "Good. Then I will ask." A moment later, the Imperial Scholar left Immortal-Seeking Pavilion. After thinking for a moment, he walked to a nearby wine shop. He stood outside for a moment, nodded, and then left. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps, the Imperial Scholar's figure suddenly vanished from sight. A moment later, when the Imperial Scholar stepped out and his feet touched the ground once more, he had arrived at Mount Dita. In front of the Imperial Scholar, the Red Cloud Sect protective array was useless. He casually glanced around. Then, his figure flickered and he arrived in a dense forest. This place didn't seem out of place, but when the Imperial Scholar sniffed several times, he could still smell the faint scent of blood. And this place was the place where Qin Yu had killed the sloppy old man. Within the scent of blood, there was an aura that confirmed that this was the method of the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect. The Imperial Scholar took a step back. His figure appeared beside a stone pagoda on the riverbank. The surrounding people were unaware of any of this. They simply couldn't see the Imperial Scholar's figure. They continued to circle around the stone pagoda, their eyes filled with curiosity and anticipation. They had all heard that not too long ago, someone had obtained good fortune in this place. This matter was no longer a secret on Mount Duta. The pagoda guard closed his eyes like a piece of deadwood. No matter how many people probed him, he didn't show the slightest reaction. After a while, no one dared to circle around him anymore. They all focused on the stone pagoda. After all, no one had ever heard that the pagoda guard could control the lucky chances on Mount Duta. As for the previous rumors, it was likely that it was just a rumor or a coincidence. At this moment, the pagoda guard's complexion changed. But before he could respond, a voice sounded in his ears, making him not dare to move a single inch. The Imperial Scholar faced the stone pagoda, but his voice sounded in the pagoda guard's mind. After asking a few questions and obtaining an answer, he no longer had any doubts. The Yang family. Many years ago, there were some matters that were buried in the annals of history. Ordinary people didn't know about them, but they couldn't hide from the Imperial Scholar. For example, he knew that a long, long time ago, the Yang family was a vassal of the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect. Even the power of the Flood Dragon in the bloodline of the Yang family was closely related to the Heaven-Splitting Sword sect. In this way, it could explain why the two of them went to Mount Duta and then returned to the Jade Gate Pass. It seemed that there was indeed no problem with the identity of the two people. Since that was the case, it was time to make a good plan for the two people. Perhaps it would be a stroke of genius that could help His Majesty fulfill his long-cherished wish. The Imperial Scholar didn't think that His Majesty's decision was bad. After all, they had violated the agreement first. In the Imperial Scholar's opinion, His Majesty was already very patient to wait for so long. At least I didn't make this trip in vain. At least I can report to His Majesty. But who was the ancient remnant hidden in the Jade Gate Pass? The way the rat hid was quite good. The imperial scholar smiled and turned to leave Mount Duta. He wasn't in a hurry. Since his trail had been discovered, it was only a matter of time before he found it. In a cabin on the ferry, Little Meat opened her eyes, and a satisfied smile appeared on her face. "You're too inexperienced to play the cautious game with me." However, when she thought of the imperial scholar calling her senior, Little Meat, who had just called herself me, couldn't help but look gloomy. Some people were simply too hateful. Just a single word from them would cause others to tear them apart. You can talk nonsense just because you have good eyesight. Just wait. I'll catch you and throw you on the ground to step in bubbles. Pop to the left. Pop to the right. On the top of the mountain, the man in the straw raincoat, who was fishing for flying fish, suddenly swung his fishing line. He looked back. Since the imperial scholar was finally willing to leave, there was no need for him to continue hiding here. The only pity was that this trip was in vain. He would have to suffer another meal of hunger. But this was a small problem. Which remnant of the ancient times hadn't experienced starvation? But that existence, the heaven-splitting sword sect, Humph, this identity was quite good at bluffing. But since the other party didn't hide anything, it was also a sign of sincerity. He was happy to see the imperial scholar and the Qin state suffer a setback, so he pretended not to hear it. Putting away the fishing rod, the man in the straw raincoat turned and disappeared from the top of the mountain. Chapter 1675. Yang Fanzan returned without a hitch. Everyone in the county city was dumbfounded. It was said that there was chaos in the Yang family that day. It was said that a female cultivator who had stolen a treasure of the Yang family had been killed on the spot after being exposed. But of course, this was just a story told to the outside world. No one was stupid. They naturally guessed that the female cultivator's death was likely related to Yang Fanshan's safe return. But when it came to the Yang family's internal affairs, no one was stupid enough to investigate to the end. The Yang family could say whatever they wanted. What they cared about was the internal situation of the Yang family. Since Yang Fanzan had returned, the death of a single elder wasn't enough. As the true ruler of East Pole County, the internal changes of the Yang family concerned the interests of many people. Even though everyone in the county city had guessed that things wouldn't end so easily. However, the Yang family was still in turmoil. The series of changes left everyone dazzled, and they simply couldn't keep up with it. In just a few days, 3 of the Yang family's powerful elders had their authority taken back and left the county city. Nominally, they went to take over the Yang family's other properties. In reality, they had been completely exiled. At the same time, several direct descendants of the Yang family who had always performed outstandingly were ordered to reflect on their mistakes. On the 4th day, the current patriarch of the Yang family suddenly announced that Yang Fanzan would become the next patriarch of the Yang family. As the saying goes, the city walls are constantly changing, and after this Yang family disciple who suddenly appeared out of nowhere after experiencing the central wasteland divine continent, he had really soared 90,000 miles. With a single leap, he became the person with the highest status and authority in the county city. There was no other, because after this announcement, the patriarch of the Yang family announced that he was going into seclusion and delegated all authority to Yang Fanzan. But what truly made everyone shudder with fear and thoroughly acknowledge Yang Fanshan's position was that the Eastern Border Army's Marshal Yang Wudi had personally come to the East Pole County City to have a private conversation with Yang Fanzan on the pretext of patrolling the border. No one knew what they talked about. But after Commander-in-Chief Yang Wudi left, Yang Fanzan was still the next patriarch of the Yang family. This in itself represented a kind of confirmation. For a time, there was an endless stream of guests in front of the Yang family. Countless affiliated or close forces came to the Yang family to show their respect and loyalty to the new leader of the Yang family. Just today, the old guardian Jin Shun, who had been promoted to a trusted aide, came forward to say that Yang Fanzan was feeling unwell and would not be receiving any guests for the time being. Because at this time, Yang Fanzan wasn't in the Yang clan. He looked at the tightly shut courtyard door, took a deep breath, and knocked on it. "He's here." Su Xianglin opened the door and looked at the person outside the courtyard. His pale face revealed a startled expression. Yang Fanzhan. Just as he called out, he revealed an awkward expression and hurriedly cupped his fists. This lowly one has offended you. Please forgive me, young Master Yang. The young master who had been drinking with him in the restaurant and who had been injured by Li Yuantai had now become the ruler of the Yang family. Su Xianglin was very clear about the power and status this identity represented. He felt uneasy in his heart. Yang Fanzhan smiled and cupped his hands. Big brother Su, we meet again. Su Xianglin's heart calmed down. He quickly waved his hand. I am not worthy of young Master Yang's title. Why have you come today? Yang Fanzhan didn't answer. He smiled and said, Big brother Su, are you not going to invite me in? No, young Master Yang, please enter. Su Xianglin hurriedly invited him into the courtyard. Before Yang Fanzhan could look around, a door was pushed open and Su Zhuo walked out. Big brother, is there a guest? Seeing Yang Fanzhan, she was startled. Su Xianglin hurriedly said, Young Master Yang, this is my little sister Su Zhuo. Zhuo, hurry and greet young Master Yang. The reason you and I were able to escape that calamity was all because of young Master Yang's help. Su Zhuo had already recognized the person in front of her. Greetings, young Master Yang. She stood up and began to return her room. Since you are speaking with Big Brother, I won't disturb you any longer. Miss Su, please wait a moment. Yang Fanzhan braced himself and said, In truth, this Yang came here today to find you. As he spoke, he gave Su Xianglin an apologetic look. Su Zhiruo's heart stirred. She thought about how this young Master Yang had just returned from the central wasteland divine continent not too long ago, and about the deal he made with that madam. Her heart skipped a beat. She felt this was inconceivable, but she couldn't help feeling shy and flustered. What if this was the case? Su Xianglin looked at Yang Fanzhan and then at his unusual little sister, a strange expression on his face. Yang Fanzhan lightly coughed and cupped his hands together. Big brother Su, I wonder if you could step aside and allow me to speak with Miss Su alone? Of course. Su Xianglin turned and walked away, but he didn't return to his room. Instead, he directly pushed open the courtyard doors, leaving the entire courtyard for the two of them. Su Zhiru almost laughed in anger. She could naturally guess what her big brother was thinking. If Yang Fanshan's actions were any more obvious, he likely wouldn't hesitate to kidnap her little sister and send her to his bed. Yang Fanzhan didn't expect Su Xianglin to have such a reaction. An awkward expression appeared on his face. Miss Su, this Yang has been presumptuous. Su Zhiruo steadied her mind. Young Master Yang, please speak. Before Yang Fanzhan came here, he hadn't thought of a good explanation. After hesitating for a long time, he decided to speak the truth. Moreover, he didn't want to hide anything from Su Zhiruo. Miss Su, this Yang came here today because I was entrusted by a madam to give you a promise. As long as you are willing, you can become this Yang's wife, the future mistress of the Yang family. I vow to take care of you for the rest of your life and never allow you to suffer the slightest grievance. Su Xianglin, who had been hiding outside the door the whole time, had his ear pressed against the door. When he heard the straightforward words, he froze on the spot. With a loud bang, the door flew open. Su Xianglin crawled up in a distressed state, a mixture of excitement and awkwardness on his face. Yang Fanzhan was still fine. After all, he was a man, and in this sort of situation, his skin would always be thicker. Su Zhiruo almost fainted from embarrassment. She thought that her big brother was far too unreliable. And what is the meaning of that look in your eyes? If Yang Fanzhan said these words to you, then big brother will be crying out in agreement right now, right? I'm not standing properly. You two don't need to worry about me. I will immediately disappear. Su Xianglin hurried out, not forgetting to close the door behind him. Su Zhiruo's face was flushed red. The courtyard fell silent. Yang Fanzhan coughed. Miss Su, I know this is rude, but please rest assured that everything I said just now is true, without the slightest bit of falsehood. Su Zhiruo suddenly looked up and stared into Yang Fanshan's eyes. Did you come to find me today just because of that madam's orders? Yang Fanzhan looked back at her and earnestly shook his head. This Yang can swear to the heavens that when I first saw you that day, I fell in love with you at first sight. So, regardless of the consequences, I exposed my identity on the spot so that you wouldn't be harmed in the slightest. This Yang admits that I came to find Miss Sue because of that madam's orders. But this is completely in line with my heart. Even without that madam, before I left seclusion, I had already decided that as long as I could come back alive, I would come find Miss Sue and express my feelings. Yang Fanshan's words were spoken with sincerity, every word coming from the depths of his heart. Su Zhihua's face blushed even more and her eyes brightened. I am willing, in fact, when I first met you, I also had an impression of young Master Yang. Yang Fanzhan was overjoyed. With a loud bang, the courtyard door was slammed open, and an ecstatic Su Xianglin rushed in. Ha ha! Good! Ha ha! You are worthy of being my little sister. You really didn't let Big Brother down. He looked at Yang Fanzhan and grinned from ear to ear. Brother-in-law, you must treat my little sister well in the future. As your brother-in-law, I will be watching. With just a few words, he sealed the coffin and threw an 8-inch iron nail. Humph humph. This kind of brother-in-law was hard to find. He absolutely couldn't miss this chance. Big Brother. Su Zhihua was ashamed and angry, wanted to hit someone. Yang Fanzhan was full of smiles. He felt that his life was nearly complete. Deep into the night, Yang Fanzhan sent the excited and drunk Su Xianglin back to her room. His eyes shined. Miss Sue, I will go back tonight. Tomorrow, I will send someone to propose marriage. Su Zhihua shook her head. In 2 days, time is too tight. Yang Fanzhan thought for a moment. This was indeed the case. Okay, then let's set it for the day after tomorrow. After sending him off, Su Zhihua returned to her room. She raised her hand and touched her face. It was still a little hot, and a smile appeared on her face. But at the same time, she was also well aware that the madam had fulfilled her promise and allowed the two of them to live a life of wealth and prosperity. It was time for her to complete this transaction. Su Zhihua opened a wooden box on her dressing table and removed the gauze. She saw a stone quietly lying within. Right now, it was constantly sprinkling out motes of the radiance of the sun and moon. This was the sun-moon stone that little Meaty had bought in Shiyu's shop. Su Zhihua had never told anyone that when this stone was first delivered to Shiyu's shop, her heart had been stirred. There seemed to be some karmic entanglement between her and this stone. Now, that feeling had come true. Without hesitation, she picked up the sun-moon stone. According to little Meaty's instructions, she placed it between her eyebrows and silently chanted an incantation. Her body trembled and a sharp pain shot out from her eyes. It felt as if he was holding a small knife and continuously slicing and slicing. Su Zhihua's complexion paled and her body trembled. But her hand that held the sun-moon stone remained steady, and she didn't pause in the slightest. In this world, there were gains and losses. If she violated the agreement, Su Zhihua believed that she would suffer a very, very miserable fate. That madam had 100, no, 1,000 ways to make her live a life worse than death. Thus, in Su Zhihua's heart, there was never the slightest bit of fluke. After an unknown period of time, Su Zhihua's body trembled and she slumped to the ground. Her tightly shut eyes slowly opened as she trembled. She still had a pair of beautiful eyes, but they no longer had the mysterious feeling from before. At this moment, the sun-moon stone in her hand shined with a dazzling light. Endless light gushed out from it, illuminating the entire room as if it were daytime. It was as if there really were 2 suns and moons living within this stone. Su Zhihua's heart felt empty, but she also felt unprecedentedly relaxed. It was as if a mountain that had always been on her back had been removed. Since you shouldn't belong to me, then leave. She loosened her hand. The sun-moon stone hummed and shattered space, vanishing from sight. In the next moment, in the distant central wasteland divine continent, on a ferry flying towards the Langya region's main city, little Meaty suddenly opened her eyes. She lifted a hand and pointed a finger at the void in front of her. An invisible strength was instantly released, covering the entire room. In the next moment, the pure and surging light of the sun and moon bloomed in her room. Little Meaty narrowed her eyes and smiled. For this pair of suns and moons, she had spent a great deal of time and effort. Luckily, she had finally succeeded and smoothly obtained them. With their support, Chinyu truly had a chance of success. Although it wasn't too great, that didn't matter. He could take it one step at a time. No one knew what the future would bring. She lifted her hand and took the sun-moon stone. The radiant and blinding light of the sun and moon immediately faded away. And the moment that Little Meaty put away the sun-moon stone in the eastern part of the central wasteland divine continent, atop a towering mountain, there was an angry roar. For 10,000 miles, the vast sea of clouds was instantly shaken apart. Then, it turned into a violent storm, accompanied by thunder and lightning. On the summit of the mountain, a giant black locust tree that had lived for countless years was struck by a bolt of lightning from the heavens. Its entire trunk was nearly split in half, and what flowed out from where it was cut was actually dark red blood that was washed away by the torrential rain. Sage Sky High appeared in the wind and rain. His hair was half black and half white, and his expression was gloomy and gloomy. His face was dark and gloomy, and his eyes were filled with a cruel, killing intent that left one terrified. Even the rain that filled the skies didn't dare to approach him at all, as if they feared he would take out his anger on them. After planning for thousands of years, the great good fortune of the sun and moon had been completely missed. Not only did this mean that thousands of years of time had been wasted, but it was also a major setback on the road of the Great Tao that would be difficult to repair in the future. Who is it? Rumble, rumble. In the skies, countless bolts of thunder exploded, accompanied by sage, sky-high roars. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws in the pitch-black skies, radiating out for thousands of miles. It was a terrifying sight. You have stolen my lucky chance and ruined my great Tao. I swear that I will find you no matter the cost. I will extract your soul and grind your bones to ashes, making it so that you will never be able to reincarnate. The black locust tree broke apart and blood gushed out like a pillar. As Chinyu was cultivating, he suddenly felt his heart race. He opened his eyes and discovered that his forehead was covered in beads of sweat. He focused his mind and didn't sense anything wrong. But the trembling in his heart didn't fade away for a long time. Something had happened. Something had definitely happened. Thinking for a moment, Chinyu stood up and pushed open the door. He knocked on the door. Little Meaty seemed to have guessed that he would come. After several knocks, the door opened from the inside. She glanced at Chinyu's pale complexion and lightly said, "Did you feel it?" As expected, she knew. Chinyu was deeply worried. He entered the room and said, "What's going on? I feel like I've been targeted by someone." After a pause, his complexion became increasingly ugly. "It's like a very strong existence, so strong that I thought I would die, without a doubt, just now." Little Meaty's lips curled up. "Congratulations, your intuition was correct." Chinyu rubbed his face. "It's already like this. Can't we speak properly? I haven't done anything at all, so how could I be targeted by someone?" Little Meaty flipped her hand, and the sun-moon stone rested in her palm. "Suzhou just completed the transaction with me. Simply put, you stole someone else's supreme great Tao treasure and ruined their cultivation. Isn't that explanation enough?" Chapter 1676. It was simply too sufficient. Chinyu bitterly smiled. His eyes fell on the sun-moon stone. "The sun and moon in my eyes are inside." Little Meat nodded. "Sir Chin, you must think this through. Once you receive it, you will have formed a death grudge with that person. Moreover, that person is very, very strong, strong enough that he can kill you with a single hand. Don't wait until the future. If you regret it and say that I didn't explain things clearly to you, then I really won't have a place to reason with." Chinyu's teeth ached. He had spent so much effort to obtain this thing. But what about it? Could he give it back to that person? There was no such reasoning in this world. Clenching his teeth, Chinyu reached out and took the sun-moon stone. "How do I use it?" Little Meat's lips curled up. You won't reconsider? Qin Yu shook his head. Man, Little Meat gave him a thumbs up. The method is simple and reliable. Take the Sun Moon Stone and press it between your eyebrows. Qin Yu pressed it halfway and stopped. Are you sure there's nothing else? Little Meat shook her head. He took a deep breath. With a loud paw, the Sun Moon Stone pressed between his eyebrows. Wherever it touched, the flesh and blood instantly turned to ash, revealing the bones underneath. The Sun Moon Stone seemed to be directly embedded within. Endless radiance of the sun and moon instantly erupted. Qin Yu's eyes widened and his face twisted. When Su Zhiruo had tried to guide the sun and moon into the Sun Moon Stone, the pain he had to endure was 10. But now, if Qin Yu wanted to fuse this pair of suns and moons into his body, he would need to experience at least 100 or even several hundred points of pain. There was a famous saying in the world that a forcefully twisted melon was not sweet. If something wasn't yours to begin with and you wanted to forcefully take it away, then you had to pay a corresponding price. If this world was considered from this perspective, then it could be considered fair. Little Meat. Qin Yu clenched his teeth and roared. Little Meat rubbed her nose. What? I praised you just now. You are a man. If you can't even withstand a little bit of pain, then what kind of man are you? Qin Yu, you can do it. I have high hopes for you. This little bit of pain shouldn't be a problem for you. With a flick of her sleeves, the space in front of her folded, instantly forming hundreds of layers that sealed away Qin Yu's aura. Of course, what was sealed away was the aura of the sun and moon leaking out. Otherwise, if it was discovered by others, that would be another problem. It had to be known that the two of them were on a ferry that was constantly moving. They weren't standing still in the same spot. As for the spatial seal that Meaty laid down, it was actually able to steadily envelop Qin Yu. Just this point alone was extraordinary. But unfortunately, Qin Yu didn't have the slightest inclination to care about these things. This was because the so-called fusion of the sun and moon into one's body was probably similar to turning the sun and moon into copper liquid and forcibly pouring it into one's body. One could imagine how great that feeling was. 2 days later, the ferry docked at a pier called the Flower and Bird Forest. This place was rich in special flowers and plants, as well as all kinds of pocket-sized birds. They couldn't be considered as spirit beasts that could help cultivators fight, but they were quite popular with some female cultivators. Some of them were special and rare, and could often be sold for a high price. Naturally, Little Meat wasn't interested in any of this. She didn't even get off the ferry. Instead, she called over the cultivators on the ferry and had them pick some local fruits for her. It didn't matter how much spiritual energy they contained, as long as they tasted good. The ferry stopped for 2 days before setting off again. Little Meaty sat in her room and ate some fruits. Occasionally, she would turn her head to look at the several hundred layers of folded space seals. Qin Yu's progress was good. He had already eaten almost half of them. At this speed, he should be able to finish in 3 to 5 days. As expected, when it came to enduring hardship, Qin Yu was extremely talented. Little Meaty nodded in satisfaction. Then, she looked up and glanced somewhere on the ferry. She couldn't help but frown, thinking that this little girl was really haunting her like a ghost. Could it be that there was some fate between her and Qin Yu? Bah, what bullshit fate. If I say it isn't, then it isn't. Even if it really is, I can still cut it off for you. Before I figure out just what relationship I have with Qin Yu, the word fate doesn't exist in his life. In the highest cabin of the ship, Niu Daodu was riding the ferry to the main city with the 2 little fellows. Suddenly, she shivered. She had been slumped on the table listlessly, but now, with a loud thud, she sat up and looked around. Miss, what is it? The young girl across from her asked with concern. She looked around 13 to 14 years old. Niu Daodu wiped away the cold sweat on her forehead. It's nothing. I might have just had a nightmare. After waking up, Yuan Qin, who had become a maid, was filled with gratitude towards the young miss in front of her. But as she heard these words, she couldn't help but be speechless. She thought that the young miss was good at everything, but sometimes she was confused. You didn't even sleep just now. So how could you have had a nightmare? Miss, are you hungry? How about I have Yuan who go find someone on the ferry and have them bring you dinner? Nyodaudu thought for a moment. It seemed that she had eaten not too long ago. Moreover, the small kitchen on the ferry could only be considered average. But even though she thought this, she still nodded. In any case, she had nothing better to do, so she might as well eat something. She had no idea why the old ancestor had left in such a hurry this time. It was best if he didn't fight with others. Thinking of this, Nyodaudu couldn't help but sigh. The old ancestor was already so old, but his impatient temper still couldn't be changed. It truly left one feeling helpless. The day before the ferry arrived at the main city, Chinyu, who had been sealed in layers of space for nearly 10 days in Little Meaty's room, finally returned to his room with a pale complexion. This scene fell into the eyes of the other residents in the corridor. As they watched Chinyu weakly close the door, it was hard to say whether their eyes were filled with envy or sympathy. Kissing a beautiful woman was something that any man in the world would be excited about. But 1 kiss, 2 kisses, 3 kisses, and even 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 kisses, that was a bit frightening. After all, there were only cows that died of exhaustion in this world. They had never heard of anyone's fields being plowed to the ground. This was nearly 10 days in a row. To be locked in a room and not come out, even a man made of iron likely wouldn't be able to withstand it. Whether it was a golden spear or a silver spear, it would all turn into a slug. Closing the door, Chinyu lay down on the bed, closed his eyes, and fell asleep. As for those gazes just now, he could feel them, but he didn't have the energy to care. They could think whatever they wanted, but he wanted to sleep now. Unfortunately, even this tiny wish wasn't completely satisfied. Before Chinyu could naturally wake up, he was woken up by Little Meaty. They had arrived at the main city. Chinyu recovered a bit of his spirit, but his complexion still wasn't too good. He was a bit pale, and his feet were unsteady. It had to be said, this really did seem like it. Stepping off the ferry, he saw that the main city's pier was the largest one. There were countless people coming and going, and there were many ferries docked here. Unfortunately, he didn't see any large ferries that could cross regions. Most of them were small and medium-sized. First, he found the ticket office at the pier and asked the cultivator on duty about the arrival of the ferry. His luck wasn't bad, but it was only after 7 days that a large ferry would arrive. Moreover, it couldn't go straight to the Long Mountain territory. They would need to make a transfer midway. Little Meaty rolled her eyes. "What are you looking at me for? Do you really think it's easy to carry you through space? Just obediently take the ferry." Chinyu handed over a silver-spotted copper coin as a down payment for the ticket. For the cultivator on duty, he obtained a transmission token. Once the ferry arrived, they would be notified as soon as possible. Little Meaty turned and walked away. Chinyu followed behind her. She glanced in a certain direction and then turned around without hesitation. There was some distance between the pier and the main city. Luckily, flying wasn't prohibited here, so the two soon arrived at the main city. After handing over 2 blue gold coins, the two smoothly entered the city. This time, Little Meaty stopped Chinyu's suggestion of finding a random inn. She swept her eyes around and said, "Follow me." The two walked away. After some time, they stopped in a common-looking alley on a long street. Chinyu's eyes flashed. He sensed a strange fluctuation. Little Meaty said, "We'll be staying here for the next few days." He took a step forwards. Space rippled, as soft and gentle as water, swallowing up the two. In the next moment, their field of vision widened. A grand and imposing courtyard appeared in front of them. Without mentioning the style of construction, just looking at the roof and the flowing tiles, one could clearly feel what it meant to be rich and overbearing. Between the heavens and earth, the spiritual energy was extremely rich, so rich that it could drown a person within. Before the two could speak, the courtyard doors opened from the inside. A maid carrying a lantern came out, carefully and respectfully leading the way. Behind her was a gorgeously dressed woman, but when used to describe her, there wasn't the slightest sense of disparagement. Rather, it was filled with an air of nobility. From her back, one could tell that she had quite the background. The woman smiled and bowed. "Two guests. Is this the first time you've come to our heavenly fragrance residence?" Welcome, welcome. However, there is something I must make clear to you too. Because a grand meeting of cultivators has been held in the county city recently, many guests from all over have chosen to stay at our heavenly fragrance residence. Thus, there is only a single heaven-class courtyard left in our store. As the woman spoke, she glanced at the two people across from her. When she didn't see any change in their expressions, her smile widened. The heaven-class room is the most expensive. Each night, it costs a silver-spotted copper coin, but it is absolutely worth it. It is the courtyard closest to the heavenly fragrance residence's spiritual energy spring. If one cultivates here, it can be said to be twice the result with half the effort. Little Meaty nodded. This is it. The woman smiled and reached out a hand. Please enter. Heavenly Fragrance Residence was hidden in the main city and was known as the top immortal inn. Naturally, this reputation wasn't undeserved. But when they truly stepped into the heaven-class courtyard that cost a silver-spotted copper coin every night, they finally understood what it meant to get what you paid for. Little Meaty swept her eyes around, satisfied. The woman had trained her eyesight to welcome guests. She smiled and said a few words about daily meals and other such matters. Then, she turned and left with the maid carrying the lantern. Chinyu coughed. Did you need to choose such an expensive place? A silver-spotted copper coin a night. Even when Yang Fanzhan was here, he wasn't so generous. Little Meaty glanced at him. Since you know it's expensive, why don't you hurry up and cultivate? Chinyu sighed and turned to leave. In truth, he knew that the reason Little Meaty chose Heavenly Fragrance Residence was because he hadn't fully recovered yet and needed a better cultivation environment. She was clearly concerned about someone else, so why couldn't she just say it out loud? Why did she have to put on a cold face? But in truth, Chinyu's guess was only half right. Little Meaty chose Heavenly Fragrance Residence because she wanted to give him an environment where he could recover as soon as possible. The other half of the reason was because she had seen some interesting things before. When collecting a chess piece, one didn't necessarily have to look at one's cultivation. Sometimes, potential was even more important. Perhaps a chess piece that didn't seem too important today might play an extremely crucial role in the future. Thinking about it, Little Meaty decided not to think about it for now. When it came to collecting chess pieces, she needed to wait for the right time. If she acted at the right time, she would be able to achieve twice the results with half the effort and achieve the best results. She was very experienced in doing these things. After all, before she met Chinyu, she had already played chess for many years. Moreover, the chessboard was quite large. Several hundred meters away from the Heaven-class courtyard was one of the several superior Earth-class courtyards in Heavenly Fragrance Residence. A white-haired old woman in embroidered robes sat on a chair. She looked at the black-clothed woman who had fallen to the ground. Little girl, I will give you one last chance. Do you really not want to join our Golden Toad Palace? If you change your mind now, there is still time. The black-clothed woman lowered her head, not speaking. The old woman sneered. If that's the case, then don't blame me. Chapter 1677. There are some things that you couldn't avoid even if you wanted to. For instance, an ill-fated relationship. Not long after Ruru and Chin, you moved into the small Heaven-class courtyard. The concealing array formation outside the heavenly fragrance and was triggered again. Another guest arrived. The gorgeously dressed lady boss was both happy and helpless. She hadn't lied before. There was indeed only one last courtyard left in the heavenly fragrance inn. Guest, I am very sorry, but the inn is full today. Please find another place to stay. Neo Doubted gasped and immediately frowned. She had walked for a long time before finding a place, but she still couldn't stay. How could the old ancestor be so unreliable? He said that he had connections here and that it wouldn't be a problem for her to stay. He also said that the chef's cooking skills were excellent. So when she got off the ferry, she was filled with anticipation and even swallowed a liter of saliva. Now she couldn't even get in. Thinking for a moment, Neo Daudu flipped her hand and took out a ring. Does the innkeeper recognize this? My old ancestor said that you can stay here with this. The gorgeously dressed woman's eyes fell on the ring. Her complexion changed, and then she smiled. "Honored guest, please forgive me for not going out to greet you. Please come with me." Yuan Qin pulled the Mrs. sleeve and pointed at the ring in her hand. Neo Dowda nodded and put it away. After entering the Heavenly Fragrance Inn, they turned left and right and arrived at a quiet courtyard that smelled of cosmetics. The spiritual strength here was no less than that of the small heaven-class courtyard. The woman waved her hand and dismissed the maid carrying the lantern. Then, she respectfully knelt on the ground. "I am Hua Xiangrong. Greetings, miss." Neo Dowda frowned. She thought for a moment and asked, "This is the Neo family's property?" Hua Xiangrong respectfully cowed out. "Reporting to miss, I don't know who the great figure behind the scenes of the Heavenly Fragrance Inn is, but I recognize this ring. Since you have it, you are now the owner of the Heavenly Fragrance Inn." Neo Dowda didn't feel anything. The Neo family was a big family, and she had seen it since she was a child. She didn't think that it was a big deal to have a top immortal in their business. What satisfied her even more was that she could smoothly stay here today and then have a good taste of the chef praised by the old ancestor. Perhaps the old ancestor's words were unreliable in other aspects, but when it came to eating and drinking, Neo Dowdu still acknowledged the old ancestor's judgment. Hua Xiangrong felt uneasy and knelt on the ground to beg for forgiveness. "Miss, I didn't know you were coming today. The rooms in the inn are indeed full. How about I ask the guests in the heaven-class courtyard to leave and make room for you?" Neo Dowdu waved her hand. "There's no need for that. I know how to do business. This place is not bad, and the spiritual energy is also passable. Let's stay here for a few days." "That's right. I heard that the chef of your Heavenly Fragrance restaurant is quite good. The three of us are already hungry from the journey. Quickly ask him to make a few of his signature dishes and send them over." Hua Xiangrong breathed a sigh of relief and hurriedly saluted. "Miss, please wait a moment. I'll arrange it right away." This place was actually her residence. Now that Neo Dowdu had occupied it, she was not the least bit dissatisfied. Instead, she felt extremely honored. Although Hua Xiangrong didn't know the origin and background of this young lady, that ring was enough to make Hua Xiangrong breathless. Not to mention, from the details, Hua Xiangrong had seen through Neo Dowdu's background and confidence. She had already concluded that this was definitely a young lady with a frightening background. The good news was that the other party seemed to be inexperienced and not difficult to serve. If she could take this opportunity to establish a relationship with her, she might be a great blessing in the future. The entire kitchen of the Heavenly Fragrance restaurant began to operate. 3 highly respected chefs who rarely cooked in person were asked by Hua Xiangrong to light the fire. Delicious dishes were continuously sent to the small courtyard where Neo Dowdu lived. Neo Dowdu was very satisfied with the food. The sun and the moon were integrated into his body. It was not that Qin imitated them and directly put them into his eyes. In fact, before this pair of sun and the moon, there was another pair of sun and the moon hidden in his hand, the shadow of the sun and the moon that rose in the east and set in the west around the soul in the soul space. Originally, they were real, just a shadow. Although they were extremely solid, they were not real entities. But now it was different. The sun and the moon that were integrated into Qin Yu's body entered the soul space and merged with the shadow of the sun and the moon. It was like the encounter of the body and the soul. After a short run-in, the two sides formed a brand new body, or to be more precise, this was the real sun and moon. It still rose in the east and set in the west. Under the new sun and moon force field, Qin Yu's soul was in an extremely mysterious state. It was like an amplifier that enhanced the strength of Qin Yu's soul in its normal state. Moreover, the new sun and moon force field could help Qin Yu to continuously gather the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. And this was also the key point that little Meaty wanted to get after discovering the sun and moon in Su Zhiruo's eyes. The new sun and moon force field would be the strongest support for Qin Yu to smoothly advance to the Emperor realm in 30 years. The reason why Qin Yu didn't hesitate to pay a high price to stay in the Heavenly Fragrance restaurant was because in his current state, he really needed a huge amount of spiritual energy of heaven and earth to stabilize the sun and moon force field as soon as possible. Qin Yu, who was very clear about this, directly began to practice in seclusion on the day he moved in. For 3 days in a row, the heavenly fragrance in was calm and peaceful. Little Meaty was very patient and didn't feel anxious at all. However, when her gaze swept across a small courtyard not far away, she couldn't help but frown, a bit of gloominess appearing on her face. Even though they were going in opposite directions, they were still able to meet in the same place. This fate really wasn't small, although she was the one who had asked Qin Yu to save Niu Daodu and leave her a favor so that she could act on her behalf in the future. But now, she was still secretly annoyed and even a bit regretful. She shouldn't have meddled in the matter back then. The only thing that was slightly comforting was that Niu Daodu had stayed in the garden after she arrived. Her only hobby was to eat, and she didn't run over to do anything. Otherwise, little Meaty would have long since thrown the little girl out. Late at night on the 4th day, without warning, a low rumble suddenly erupted. The courtyard of the heavenly fragrance immediately exploded with dazzling light. This was the forbidden formation that had been set up here. It was activated after being attacked by an external force. It imprisoned and counteracted the destructive power, preventing the area from being too large. Although the heavenly fragrance had invested a great deal of capital into the forbidden formation, the disturbance this time was far too great. There was still a small earth-ranked courtyard that was nearly razed to the ground. The several surrounding courtyards also suffered the same degree of impact. Just those broken tiles of flowing light were enough to make one's heart wrench. Hua Xiangrong, who had finally managed to curry favor with Niu Daodu, appeared outside the earth-ranked courtyard with a livid face. Her eyes were as cold as knives. It had been many years since anyone had dared to cause trouble in the heavenly fragrance inn. But once something did happen, it was a major event, and it just had to happen now. She remembered that this earth-ranked courtyard was the residence of an elder of Golden Toad Palace. He had a black-clothed woman who didn't look like a maid by his side. But even if it was Golden Toad Palace, this matter couldn't be easily resolved today. Lowly maid, you deserve to die. With an angry shout, the old woman of Golden Toad Palace flew into the air. Her eyes burst out with a sharp light as she swept her eyes around the heavenly fragrance inn. Hua Xiangrong's face darkened. Elder son, no matter what you are doing, you must give me an explanation for causing such a disturbance today. The old woman, surnamed Sun's complexion became even uglier. Her heart was filled with anger, and a trace of ruthlessness appeared in her eyes. But soon, these emotions were suppressed into the depths of her heart. She had heard of the Celestial Incense Lodge before. Its background was mysterious and unfathomable. Rumor had it that a peak sovereign realm expert, who was only one level away from the Emperor realm, had caused trouble because of his cultivation. In the end, he had been severely injured and nearly died on the spot. Although these rumors were somewhat exaggerated, the fact that the heavenly fragrance wasn't to be trifled with was a publicly acknowledged fact in the Langya region. A strong dragon couldn't suppress a local snake. Not to mention that Golden Toad Palace wasn't a truly strong dragon. It was better to be cautious. The old woman took a deep breath. Shopkeeper Hua, rest assured, after I find that lowly maid, I will take responsibility for today's losses. Hua Xiangrong was expressionless. That would be for the best. The old woman sucked in a breath. As if sensing something, she diabolically grinned. Found you, Shua. Her figure moved. In an instant, she crossed several miles and arrived outside a small courtyard. Before she could act, she was stopped by Hua Xiangrong, who followed closely behind. She was furious. She thought that the cultivators of Golden Toad Palace were just as the rumors said. They were all arrogant and brainless. Elder son, stop. Hua Xiangrong's complexion was extremely ugly. This is my heavenly fragrance in small courtyard. Right now, they're honored guests staying here. Don't be presumptuous. The old woman, surnamed Sun, frowned. She raised her hand and pointed. That lowly maid beside me has escaped into this courtyard. She has a rare treasure of our golden toad palace. I must take it back. At this point, a cold light surged in her eyes, and her tone became a bit louder. This treasure is related to the cultivation secrets of my golden toad palace. Once something goes wrong, there will be no way to resolve it peacefully. Since shopkeeper Hua is here, please open the courtyard door and let me take that lowly maid away to avoid trouble. These words were not only to pressure Hua Xiangrong, but also to remind the people living in the heavenly fragrance not to meddle in other people's business. Although Golden Toad Palace wasn't one of the top sects in the Divine Central Wasteland, it still had a bit of reputation. The Taoist companion of the sect master was a half-emperor realm rogue cultivator. Otherwise, at the Jade Gate Pass, she wouldn't have been qualified to speak with Qingjiang Lake. Hua Xiangrong didn't know if this was true or not, but since the old woman's surnamed son said so, it would be troublesome. Moreover, the other party's request wasn't too excessive. Although Heavenly Fragrance Inn didn't fear Golden Toad Palace, it was still an immortal inn's business. In the dark of night, who knew how many guests were watching this place? If they were too aggressive, they would lose a lot of reputation. After hesitating for a while, Hua Xiangrong nodded. Elder son, please be patient. I will go open the door. She landed outside the Heavenly Fragrance Inn and knocked on the door. Once, twice, thrice. There was no response. The eyes of the old woman, surnamed Sun, were icy cold. Could it be that the guests living here have discovered the treasure on that lowly maid and want to take it? Hua Xiangrong frowned and raised her voice. Guest, please open the door. She used some of her cultivation when she said this. Her voice penetrated the restriction and resounded in the entire Heavenly Fragrance Inn. Without batting an eyelid, the shopkeeper revealed a bit of his realm. This caused the gazes that gathered on him to retract a bit. With a squeak, the courtyard door opened from the inside. Little Ro expressionlessly asked, What do you want? Seeing them come out, Hua Xiangrong's face softened a little. She apologized. Guest, I'm really sorry to disturb your rest. The situation is like this. A servant girl of the Golden Toad Palace's elder son secretly escaped with a treasure. According to elder son's judgment, the treasure is currently hidden in the heaven-class courtyard. I hope that guest can make things convenient for her and let her in to take a look. After a short pause, she continued, To express our apology, Heavenly Fragrance Inn is willing to waive the cost of tonight's guest. If you stay for a few more days, I'm willing to give you another discount on the total cost. This was the attitude that a businesswoman should have. Of course, this was also because Hua Xiangrong had already made up her mind that all the losses tonight would be on the account of the old woman of Golden Toad Palace. A small earth fragrance inn was destroyed, and several other courtyards were also affected. This was not a small sum of money. It was just a few more nights' rent. Presumably, this elder son wouldn't have a problem with this. At the top. Chapter 1678. Little Meaty said no. There was no hesitation at all. Old Lady Sun's eyes widened in an instant. But before she sneered, she was shrouded by Little Meaty's eyes. My companion is breaking through the training. She has been disturbed before. How should we settle this? For some reason, the usually domineering old woman's son's expression suddenly changed. The little girl in front of him didn't look very old, but now that she was looking at him, he felt his heart tremble. But that *TCH was in this yard. She was sure of this, so she was not willing to give up. Looking at Hua Xiangrong, Old Lady Sun said in a low voice, Shopkeeper Hua, this happened in the Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. What should we do? I must catch that *TCH and bring her back to the Golden Toad Palace for trial. Although she didn't know why the aggressive old lady son was extinguished after being glanced at, Hua Xiangrong was not stupid. But Hua Xiangrong was not a fool. Otherwise, she could not have become the manager of the Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. Hearing this, her eyes flickered, and she shook her head. Elder son, you and the distinguished guest in front of you are both guests of the Heavenly Fragrance Restaurant. I can only mediate in this matter. As for the details, it is up to you two to discuss. Of course, I have to remind Elder Son that you can't do it again. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless." That sentence not only gave her a warning, but also cleared her name. In short, she could not be used by Old Lady Sunday. Little Meaty said indifferently, "You haven't answered my question before. How can you compensate?" Old Lady Sun's face was livid. She wanted to turn hostile, but her heart trembled. She gritted her teeth, turned around, and left. Hua Xiangrong was unwilling to intervene, and she didn't dare to break in. If she didn't leave, would she continue to lose face? Anyway, that TCH was hiding in the yard. How could she fly away? Old Lady Sun secretly made up her mind. Next, she must keep a close eye on this small yard. She wanted to see whether they could hide in it forever. As long as they came out, she would be in the right. At that time, the Heavenly Fragrance restaurant could not continue to mediate. Little Meaty closed the door and turned to look at the black-robed woman lying on the ground in the yard. She had tried her best to escape here and then passed out. After thinking for a moment, Little Meaty raised her hand and made a grabbing motion. An invisible force surged out, lifting the black-robed woman up and following her into the room. He placed her on the bed and placed a meaty finger between the black-robed woman's eyebrows. After several breaths of time, he took back his finger and nodded, a satisfied expression on his face. "Not bad. He is even better than I imagined. If I train him carefully, he will be much more useful than Wei Han." The next day, the black-clothed woman who was in a coma finally woke up. He stood up abruptly, aggravating his internal injuries. With a groan, his face turned pale, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. However, her eyes remained vigilant as she quickly scanned her surroundings. Her tense body did not relax in the slightest. "Are you awake?" Little Meaty opened her eyes and looked at her with a calm expression. The black-clothed woman took a deep breath and said slowly, "We met before we entered the central wasteland." Little Meat nodded. "You have a good memory. Then you'd better remember who saved your life today." The woman in black pursed her lips. "Thank you for saving me." Little Rose said indifferently, "There's no need to say thank you when it comes out of your mouth. I saved you because your aptitude is not bad." The black-clothed woman was well aware of this. The reason she encountered a calamity today was because of her own aptitude. In her eyes, she subconsciously revealed a trace of worry. Little Meat said, "I'm not like those people from Golden Toad Palace. They do things crudely, and they're also brainless. But there are some things I want to ask you. It's best if you tell me the truth. First, when you rejected the recruitment of Golden Toad Palace and Green River Lake, was it because you already had a goal?" The black-clothed woman nodded. "Yes." After a brief pause, she continued to say, "What I want to enter is Black Marsh." Little Meat snapped her fingers. "One of the upper 4 sections. You have strength, and you have a deep background. Moreover, it is very compatible with your cultivation path. This is a good choice." Her eyes fell. "With your aptitude, entering Black Marsh is no problem. But, at most, you will only have the status of an inner court disciple. You will not receive much care, and your future achievements will be relatively limited." The black-clothed woman didn't speak. A dim light flashed in her eyes. After she entered the Central Wasteland, she had inquired about Black Marsh and knew that Little Meat was right. As one of the 4 strongest sects of the Central Wasteland Divine Continent, every disciple of Black Marsh was a proud son of heaven. It could be said that this was a place where stars gathered. When she entered the Jade Gate Pass, the heaven-peaking insects had probed her talent and caused 5-colored light to erupt. There was even a trace of 6-colored light that descended. It seemed incomparably breathtaking, immediately attracting the attention of Golden Toad Palace and Green River Lake, the 2 great Central Wasteland sects. But in truth, compared to true peerless geniuses, there was still a great disparity. Only those with 6-color talent had the qualifications to become a direct disciple of Black Marsh. Only those with peak 7-color talent could enter the ancestral hall and light a soul lamp, becoming a true inheritor of the great Tao. Little Meat suddenly asked, "You want revenge?" The black-clothed woman nodded. "A blood feud. Is the status of an inner court disciple enough?" The black-clothed woman thought for a moment and then shook her head. Little Meat smiled. Very good. Then, we could discuss a mutually beneficial cooperation. For instance, I can think of a way to improve your talent. I can't say that you can reach 7-color talent, but a 6-color talent is 90% guaranteed. Once you become a direct disciple of Blackmarsh, you will have the qualifications to cultivate all the cultivation methods of the sect. Perhaps one of them will be extremely suitable for you. The black-clothed woman was startled. She felt as if her entire being had been seen through, as if there were no secrets left. She looked up and met Little Meat's eyes. But she wasn't able to sense even the slightest fluctuation from her smiling face. She only felt that Little Meat's eyes were like the deep sea, impossible to see through. Inexplicably, awe gushed out from the depths of her heart. Like a burning hot iron, it directly branded into her soul. The black-clothed woman clenched her teeth. She struggled up and fell to her knees. I beg you to help me. Meowya is willing to pay any price. Little Meat lifted a hand and grasped forwards. A mote of light condensed. Within it was the shadow of Meowya that had shrunk countless times over. Very good. I have already accepted the words you said just now. The black-clothed Meowya looked up, a puzzled expression on her face. At this time, Little Meat pointed out a finger. With a light cracking sound, the flesh between her eyebrows split apart. Countless cracks spread outwards with her as the center, covering her entire body. Ah! Meowya screamed in pain. She wildly rolled on the ground. Little Meat had no expression. Remember the pain you are feeling right now. Do not faint, otherwise this suffering will be for nothing. With a thought, layers of space descended, covering Meowya within and isolating her aura. Something like increasing one's talent was easy to say. Looking at the vast world, there weren't many people that could accomplish this. Little Meat could be considered one of them. Even so, this didn't mean that it could be accomplished in a single step. In this world, there was no such thing as a meat pie that fell from the heavens. If one wanted to obtain something, they had to endure as much as they could. As the saying went, break and then rebuild. One had to break and cleanly without harming one's source. Only then would there be a chance for transformation. This was a great test of one's skill. Some people had good luck and were able to succeed on their first try. But there were also some people who were born with misfortunes and misfortunes. They might not succeed even after dozens of tries. Thus, Meowya would likely have to continue staying by her side for a period of time. Luckily, this girl could only be considered ordinary. The 2 pieces of flesh on her chest were much worse than Little Meat. This left her feeling gratified. The apex. Chapter 1679. There was a letter from the doc. After Chinyu looked through it, he stopped cultivating. He sensed the state of his body and smiled. Staying in Heavenly Fragrance Residence was a bit expensive, but it was worth it. He stood up and walked to Meaty's room. Before he could knock, the door opened from within. Meaty stepped out, holding a fruit she had never seen before in her hands. She was eating it with relish. Chinyu greeted her and went straight to the point. The doc sent a message saying that the ferry will arrive tomorrow. They want us to go ahead of time. Meaty bit into the fruit. I want to buy 3 tickets. Before Chinyu could ask why, he saw the black-clothed Meowya walk out from behind Meaty. His eyes widened. Meaty said, "She will be following us for some time." Meowya greets my lord. Chinyu thought back to the movements he had sensed several nights ago. Because Meaty was here, he hadn't paid much attention to it. But now, it seemed that the reason this black-clothed woman called Meowya had appeared here was because of that night's movements. Another chess piece? Chinyu asked with his eyes. Meaty nodded. Chinyu coughed and nodded in greeting. He looked at Meaty and asked, "Are we leaving like this?" Meaty said, "We haven't paid the bill to Heavenly Fragrance Residence yet. We can't just live in a tyrant's shop." Chinyu thought for a moment and determined that this was just an excuse. Seeing that she had no other explanation, he said, "Then let's go." Meowya revealed a worried expression. She looked at the 2 people in front of her. After a moment of hesitation, she lowered her head and remained silent. Golden Toad Palace's old woman's son originally thought that she would have to wait for some time. She had already prepared herself to wait until her death. But today, the courtyard doors had suddenly opened. This caused the complexion of old woman's son, who had been closely observing this place, to change. Could it be that her senses were wrong? That cheap maid hadn't escaped inside. If that was the case, then things would be troublesome. But soon, old woman's son discovered that she had been overthinking things. Her senses hadn't been wrong. Following that, old woman's son's face flushed red. Flames of anger blazed in her chest, and the only thought in her mind was, they had gone too far. Chinyu walked in front, Misty followed behind, and Miaoya lowered her head and followed. For better or worse, shouldn't they have disguised themselves a bit? This is simply looking down on us to the extreme. Do you have no respect for our Golden Toad Palace? This was intolerable. Old Lady Sun was furious. She couldn't care less. Her figure flashed and blocked the way. She gritted her teeth and said, "Fine. Today, you are caught red-handed. What else do you have to say?" Her ice-cold gaze fell on Miaoya. "Little slut, when I bring you back to Golden Toad Palace, I will naturally make you regret your actions." Little Misty said without expression, "Chinyu, someone is blocking the way." Chinyu coughed. "Fellow Taoist from Golden Toad Palace, can you make way for me?" Old woman's son was about to go mad from anger. "Don't go too far. My Golden Toad Palace isn't a place to be trifled with. Hurry up and exchange this lowly servant to me. Otherwise, I'll absolutely not let the matter rest today." Chinyu thought for a moment, then turned and said, "Miaoya." "Yes." Miaoya walked out. Chinyu pointed a finger. "You know this person?" Miaoya shook her head. "Oh, then you must have mistaken me for someone else." Chinyu looked over. "Whether or not Golden Toad Palace is easy to provoke, I'm not too sure. But I can overlook the matter of you mistaking me for someone else. If you step aside now, nothing will happen to you. Otherwise, don't blame me for not reminding you." Chinyu already understood little Misty's meaning. In terms of his heart, the words he spoke at this time were absolutely priceless advice. Unfortunately, old woman's son had already gone mad with anger. She simply wouldn't listen to him. After being arrogant for so many years, this was the first time she had encountered someone more arrogant than her. "Hua Xiangrong," old woman's son angrily roared. "I've already found my maid. Do you still want to continue watching?" Billowing waves of sound spread through the entire heavenly fragrance inn. Hua Xiangrong's complexion wasn't too good. Her figure fell outside the courtyard, and her eyes fell on Chinyu and little Misty. Couldn't they at least try to cover it up a little? Why did they have to be so forceful? But the miss had already ordered her to take care of the people in the courtyard. Even though she knew that many eyes were gathering on her, she could only brace herself and endure it. "Elder son, there are still many guests in the heavenly fragrance inn. It's really beneath your dignity for you to yell." Hearing this, old woman's son's heart skipped a beat. No one was a fool. Of course, they could sense the lingering meaning in her words. Who on earth was living in this heaven-class courtyard? The heavenly fragrance inn had made it clear that it was willing to side with them, regardless of face. But to ask old woman's son to give up, she certainly wouldn't be willing. Besides, she had already received the deposit. If she went missing again, just thinking about the consequences made her shiver all over. She couldn't care too much. Even though she knew these two people in front of her were not to be trifled with, she could only grit her teeth and endure. "Shopkeeper Hua, as an elder of Golden Toad Palace, I only ask you one question. Did I bring this lowly maid to the heavenly fragrance inn?" Hua Xiangrong very much wanted to deny it, but unfortunately, on the day old woman's son came, she met several acquaintances. They even exchanged greetings for a while, and two of them were still living in the heavenly fragrance inn. Moreover, she also knew that during these days of waiting, old woman's son had already set out to visit these two guests. If she really denied this matter, then the reputation of the heavenly fragrance inn would be completely ruined. Taking a deep breath, Hua Xiangrong nodded. This woman was indeed brought here by Elder Sunday. Old woman's son clapped her hands. "Good." That night, This lowly maid stole a treasure of my golden-toed palace and fled into this small heaven-class courtyard. At that time, shopkeeper Hua didn't allow me to search for her, but out of respect for the heavenly fragrance inn, I waited until today. Now, this lowly maid is right in front of us, and shopkeeper Hua still wants to ignore her? Qin Yu frowned as he heard this. He couldn't help but use his divine sense to say, "Meaty, what is going on? Even if you don't like this person from Golden Toad Palace, there's no need to go through all this trouble. The problem is that we're in the wrong here." Meaty's voice sounded in his mind. What happens next is none of our business. Let's just watch the show. Qin Yu's thoughts stirred. Sure enough, this matter wasn't as simple as it seemed. Meaty's actions were so crude, as if she was deliberately giving others a handle on her. Then, she wanted to force this heavenly fragrance inn's shopkeeper Hua to step forward, but they were only temporarily staying here. So what did this have to do with her? Moreover, why would heavenly fragrance inn need to step forward? Looking at the expression on this shopkeeper Hua's face and the awkward expression on her face, she actually wanted to help. His heart was tired. He felt as if he were shrouded in fog, unable to see anything clearly. Luckily, Meaty seemed to sense his current state of mind. She continued to say, "After we leave this place, I will explain to you." Of course, the key point was that if things were as she guessed, there would be many areas where she would need Qin Yu's help. She needed to let him know some inside information. Hua Xiangrong lowered her head and thought for a moment. She said, "Elder son, I only know that it was you who brought this woman to Heavenly Fragrance and check-in. But as for the relationship between you and what happened afterwards, I am not too clear. So, after you both leave Heavenly Fragrance Inn, I ask that you discuss this matter among yourselves. Do not affect us." This was the only method she could think of. If she drove them out, she could do whatever she wanted. Whether they fought to the death or shook hands and made up, none of this had anything to do with Heavenly Fragrance Inn. Although doing so wouldn't look good, she could at least save some face. The other guests would at most think that the two guests in the Heaven class room had amazing backgrounds and that Heavenly Fragrance Inn didn't want to offend them. It was better than doing as the Miss said and recklessly favoring them, ruining Heavenly Fragrance Inn's reputation. Hiding in her room, Niu Daodu watched how things developed. Inwardly, she praised Hua Xiangrong. This was truly a good method. After all, this was her family's business. If it was destroyed like this, she would be distressed. In particular, those several chefs were quite skilled. As for how things would develop after they left Heavenly Fragrance Inn, Niu Daodu wasn't worried at all. Although this old woman from Golden Toad Palace had the title of an elder and her cultivation wasn't bad, Niu Daodu could sense that if Qin Yu wanted to roll over her, he could do so with a single hand. If she continued to tangle with him, the only one who would suffer would be her. Old Woman Sun was both shocked and angry. She became increasingly certain that Qin Yu and Little Meaty had amazing backgrounds and Heavenly Fragrance and clearly didn't want to interfere. If they continued to cause trouble, would things get out of hand? Just as she was feeling perturbed and unsure of what to do, a sneer suddenly sounded out. "So this is the famous Heavenly Fragrance Inn. I really can't agree to such a method of handling things." Dong! With a dull thud, the sky above her head began to ripple. Then, a hole was forcefully torn open and a tall figure rushed in. Old Woman Sun was overjoyed. She hurriedly bowed. "Golden Toad Palace's Sun Yuan greets Spiritual Master Yushan." Hua Xiangrong's complexion changed. She also recognized the person who had forced his way in today. Spiritual Master Yushan was an extremely famous wandering cultivator in the Langya region. Although his cultivation was only at the peak sovereign realm, he had stumbled upon a lucky chance in his early years and obtained an extremely fierce treasure. By relying on this treasure, he was able to jump realms to battle. He had once fought with a peerless half-emperor level powerhouse for a cave dwelling. Although he was ultimately defeated, he managed to escape unscathed. In addition, Spiritual Master Yushan had always been cruel and merciless. In the Langya region, he was a notoriously difficult character to deal with. Ordinary sects didn't want to provoke him, otherwise he would be like a maggot in a bone, and they would surely pay a painful price. In the past history of the Langya region, there had been two sects that had come into conflict with spiritual master Yushan. One sect had their ancestral hall demolished and completely vanished. As for the other sect, after paying a great price, they had no choice but to leave the Langya region and flee far away. As time passed, the people of Jade Mountain Town became even more vicious. Hua Xiangrong never imagined that today's matter would actually draw in this old devil. And looking at the current situation, it was clear that Old Woman Sun was related to spiritual master Yushan. This was troublesome. Feeling uneasy, Hua Xiangrong took a deep breath and stepped forward to salute. Greetings, spiritual master Yushan. Today, spiritual master, your presence brings light to heavenly fragrance residence. Spiritual master Yushan looked to be in his 50s. He was tall, with black hair and bright eyes. Hearing her words, he sneered. Don't be so polite. Hua Xiangrong, do you know that Sun Yuhuan is the maidservant who is going to be handed over to me? Hua Xiangrong's pupils shrank, and she complained bitterly in her heart. This, I really don't know. Spiritual master Yushan looked down with cold eyes and released a strong oppression. Ignorance is not a crime. I can let it go. Give me this maidservant, and today's matter will be over. Spiritual master Yushan was also very clear that heavenly fragrance residence was not to be trifled with. Otherwise, with his character, today's matter would not be over so easily. Hua Xiangrong was relieved and hurriedly said, since spiritual master has said so, heavenly fragrance residence naturally has no objection. She turned around and winked at Qin Yu and little Ruru, asking them to stop and quickly release the maidservant. This was spiritual master Yushan, who killed people like flies and was extremely tyrannical, but his cultivation was unfathomable. Offending him was basically a dead end. Even if you two have some background, in the face of an expert who can rival a half-emperor, you'd better bow your head. After all, a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. But soon, Hua Xiangrong found that all her winks were directed to the blind man, and the two opposite them did not say anything. Miaoya's face turned pale. Being stared at by spiritual master Yushan, she could not help but tremble. She felt a deep fear. There was no reason, but Miaoya was very clear that if she really fell into the hands of spiritual master Yushan, her fate would be extremely miserable. Little Ruru suddenly raised her hand and touched her head. What are you afraid of? He's just an old thing. If he wants to die, he will soon get what he wants. The whole court was silent. Hua Xiangrong widened her eyes and thought, did you two not open your ears just now? Haven't you heard the name of spiritual master Yushan? Are you really ignorant? Or are you so arrogant that you don't know what's good for you? Old Sun was very excited, and her eyes were full of excitement and resentment, as if she had already seen the two people in front of her being tortured to death by spiritual master Yushan. Aren't you arrogant? Very good. Then be more arrogant, and I'll see how you cry. Spiritual master Yushan squinted and looked at little Ruru up and down. Little girl, you're brave. I hope your background can be powerful enough to scare me. His words were full of killing intent. Qin Yu secretly smiled bitterly, thinking, what happened to watching the play? Why did I have to appear in person without paying attention? He felt an extremely strong sense of danger from spiritual master Yushan in front of him, and the change of Hua Xiangrong's attitude undoubtedly proved that his feeling was right. Little Ruru glanced at Qin Yu. It seems that we're in trouble. Qin Yu frowned. Can you say more nonsense? Little Ruru suddenly said, do you think there will be a kind-hearted person who will come out to help us get through this difficulty and kill this old thing by the way? Qin Yu didn't know what was wrong with her. After thinking for a moment, he said, I hope there will be. Little Ruru suddenly smiled and snapped her fingers. First, young Master Qin, if you say there will be, there will be. How about we make a bet? After all, the bet was not made. Nyok Daudu, who was hiding in the room, finally couldn't sit still and came out when she saw the situation was not right. The good girl, Nyok Daudu, was not only kind-hearted, but also knew how to repay kindness. Therefore, when she saw little Ruru that night, after a short shock, Niu Daodu told Hua Xiangrong to find a way to help them and not get into trouble. The aura of spiritual master Yushan, especially at this moment, was really terrible. But thinking that she owed him 2 lives, Niu Daodu braced herself and came out. The first sentence she said was to introduce herself. Niu Dingtian is my old ancestor, and Heavenly Fragrance House is the property of our Niu family. If you turn around and leave now, I can pretend that nothing has happened. It was the first time that Niu Daodu bullied, so she had no experience. Her words were full of holes, without any deterrence. However, Taoist Yushan's expression still changed. His eyes were cold and ruthless, revealing deep fear. Niu Dingtian. Ordinary cultivators might not know of this name, but for cultivators at spiritual master Yushan's level, his name was like thunder in their ears. If spiritual master Yushan was said to be the most famous rogue cultivator in the Langya region, so strong that no sect in a region dared to provoke him, then Niu Dingtian was one of the strongest rogue cultivators in the divine central desolate land, and the word one could even be removed. Even the 4 sects and 4 families, and even the Great Qin Empire, had to maintain a certain amount of respect for the old Niu family. Chapter 1680. Seeing the uncertain look on Taoist Yushan's face, Niu Daodu thought of something and took out a token. On the surface of the token was the word ox. Light swirled around it, its aura surging to the heavens. With Taoist Yushan's cultivation, he actually felt a sense of suppression in his heart. It was like facing a mountain. The girl in front of him was indeed a member of the Ox clan. Perfected Yushan's gaze landed on Miaoya. Previously, he had only checked the aura provided by Sun Yuan, so he could not be sure. But now that he saw it with his own eyes, he could confirm that this black-clothed female cultivator was indeed a top cultivation furnace. She was extremely compatible with his great Tao. If he could obtain her and cultivate in seclusion for 100 years, he might be able to cross the threshold of the celestial realm and step into the emperor realm. The thought of this made spiritual master Yushan's heart burn even hotter. So what if he was a junior of the Ox clan? Could it be that he was going to hand over the opportunity of the great Tao just because of a single sentence from this girl? It was not that immortal Yushan had not thought of stopping for the time being and waiting for them to leave the heavenly fragrance residence before making his move. However, for some reason, Jinri Yushan had a strong intuition that he had to take action here. Otherwise, once the person in front of him left, he would no longer be able to find this tripod cauldron that was compatible with the Great Tao. This intuition of the Great Tao was extremely mysterious, and Jinren Yushan firmly believed in it. Taoist Yushan took a step back and smiled. He cupped his fist and said, "I didn't know that young Lady Niu was here. Please forgive me for offending you. Since this is the property of the Ox clan, this old man naturally does not dare to be presumptuous. I will take my leave now." His body flickered, as if he were about to retreat. However, even as his foot touched the ground, a cryptic aura exploded out from within him. It was like a vast, boundless ocean that instantly covered the entire heavenly fragrance residence. With a flick of his sleeve, Sun Yuhuan, whose face had been filled with ruthlessness and delight, exploded with a bang, her soul scattering. Hua Xiangrong turned pale and screamed, "Immortal Yushan, what do you want to do?" Adept Yushan, Ning Xiao, said, "So what if he's a junior of the Ox family? Today, I will kill all of you." Dead men tell no tales. Even Niu Dingtian can't do anything about it. Although he said that, he was really confident that he could keep Miaoya in his hands and successfully break through to the half-emperor realm. With the treasures in his hands, even if he couldn't defeat a true emperor realm expert, it wouldn't be difficult for him to escape. At that time, even if Niu Dingtian really found evidence, he wouldn't need to be afraid. Bang! Reverend Yushan took a step forward and pointed his finger at Niu Daodu. Dong! A muffled sound rang out, and the space instantly distorted, wrapping around Niu Daodu. A rogue cultivator's decisiveness in killing was completely revealed. Since he had decided to make a move, he would not hesitate at all. Qin Yu raised an eyebrow. Misty squinted. Don't worry, this girl won't die. Before his voice fell, the distorted space froze, as if another strength had appeared to contend with it. Daoist Yushan's expression changed drastically. With a muffled groan, his figure retreated explosively. Without any hesitation, he turned around and fled. Bang! The distorted space shattered. Little thing, you dare to make a move on my Ox clan's little grandaunt, and you still think you can leave alive? Do you think that I, Old Ox, am shameless? A cold sneer echoed out. Qin Yu's heart shrank. He saw the rapidly retreating sage, Jade Shan, suddenly roar out loud. The world rules instantly twisted, and the phantom of a small world appeared. Within it, Qin Yu immediately felt a formidable suppression. But this little world phantom only existed for less than a breath of time. Like a bubble, it exploded with a popping sound. Along with it, Sage Jade Shan's body also shattered. He had killed Sun Yuhuan as if she were a chicken, but now he had suffered the same fate. A figure appeared in front of Niu Daodu. This figure wasn't tall, but he was like a mountain that could support the sun, moon, and stars. At this moment, Qin Yu felt a deep sense of dread towards the true peak powerhouses of the central desolate divine continent. Sage Jade Shan was already strong enough, so strong that even if Qin Yu used all his cards, he still wouldn't be a match for him. But the strong Sage Jade Shan was like an ant, directly suppressed and killed by this person in front of him. All of this happened in an instant, and what caused Qin Yu's mind to shake even more was that the person in front of him hadn't arrived with his true body. Rather, he had activated some medium and released a projection of himself. Without a doubt, this person in front of him was the Ox clan's old ancestor, Niu Dingtian. Qin Yu was unable to sense his true boundary. He only felt as if he were facing a boundless sea, as far as the eye could see. Old ancestor! Niu Daodu's tears fell like rain. I'm so scared. Niu Dingtian, who had killed Sage Jade Shan as easily as crushing an ant, instantly panicked. Don't cry, don't cry. Old ancestor is here. Don't worry, no one can touch a hair of yours. Hua Xiangrong knelt down with a thud. Greet, old ancestor. She was still dizzy. She only felt that her heart was going up and down, and she didn't know what to do. Before, she only knew that Heavenly Fragrance House had a backer, but she didn't know who the backer was. She was also very curious about it. Today, the truth was finally revealed. The old ancestor of the Ox family, Niu Dingtian. He was a legend in the rogue cultivator world. He once fought with the old ancestor of one of the four sects for 3 days and 3 nights, and finally trampled 3 mountains and left. My backer is actually old ancestor Niu, who dares to provoke our Heavenly Fragrance House in the future. This time, it was really Niu Dafa. Swish, swish, one figure after another rushed over from all directions. They knelt on the ground and kept kowtowing, thanking old ancestor Niu for saving their lives. Before, Sage Jade Shan's intention to kill them had been known to all. If it hadn't been for old ancestor Niu, they would have been dead. Moreover, it was not a big deal to kneel in front of such a legendary figure. If they could leave a little impression on him, it would be a big deal. At least, they could brag to others that they had seen old ancestor Niu's immortal demeanor in the future. Niu Dingtian turned a blind eye to it. Only Niu Daodu, who was in front of him, finally breathed a sigh of relief when she stopped crying. Little lady, please don't cry anymore. My heart is going to be broken into 8 pieces because of your crying. Niu Daodu blushed and whispered, I'm sorry, old ancestor. I'm too timid. Bah, who dares to say that my Daodu is timid? If they were facing that little bastard just now, I'm afraid they wouldn't even have the courage to stand up. Niu Dingtian patted her head. You're already very good. No, in my eyes, you're the best. No one in the world can compare with you. Niu Daodu blushed even more. How could he say these words in front of so many people? It was really embarrassing. Niu Dingtian snorted and glanced around. The crowd hurriedly lowered their heads, pretending that they didn't hear or know anything. Old ancestor. Niu Daodu pulled him. Niu Dingtian laughed and waved his hand. The show is over. Why don't you leave? Do you want me to send you off? Hearing this, the people kneeling on the ground were shocked. They didn't dare to stay any longer. After kowtowing, they got up and turned to leave. Old Ancestor Nyo's eyes fell on Chinyu. His eyes flickered with a trace of surprise. Nyo Daru said, "Old Ancestor, this brother Chin is the one who saved me. You must thank him." Nyo Dingtian laughed. "Of course. Saving my Daodu is no different from saving the whole Nyo family. I must thank him." Then he patted Nyo Daodu's shoulder. "Go take a rest. I'll have a few words with this little friend Chin." Nyo Daodu looked at the old ancestor and Chinyu. She nodded and turned to leave. After she left, old ancestor Nyo took a step and appeared in front of Chinyu. He looked at him from head to toe. "Boy, how about being the husband of my little grandaunt? Let me tell you, this is the blessing you've accumulated in your 1,800 lifetimes. If you agree, I promise to pave a way for you to cross the threshold of the celestial being realm. Your future achievements will be limitless." Chinyu's heart beat faster. It was not because he was tempted by Nyo Dingtian's proposal, but because his eyes were too scary. Being stared at by him, he felt like he was on the edge of an endless abyss and could fall into it at any time. "Terrible, terrible," little Meaty said lightly. "You're trying to poach me." "Nyo Dingtian, have you asked for my opinion?" Nyo Dingtian turned his head and his eyes fell on little Meaty. He frowned. "I thought you looked familiar before. Since you dare to speak to me like this, it seems we're old acquaintances." Little Meaty flicked her nails. "Don't play dumb. Nyo Dingtian, I don't care about your cultivation. At least your eyes are good." Her lips curled up into a smile. "Or do you think it's better for us to not know each other when we meet?" Nyo Dingtian grinned and let out a breath. He rubbed his eyebrows. "I just didn't expect that thing to be true. You gave up so much just for him?" Little Meaty said, "This matter has nothing to do with you." The smile on her face deepened. "What? Does old ancestor Nyo think that I'm not qualified to be on equal footing with you in my current state?" Chin Yu's body tensed. Little Meaty and this old ancestor Nyo actually knew each other. It was just that it was hard to judge their relationship. From their conversation, they seemed to be friends yet enemies. He felt that what would happen next would depend on how this old ancestor Nyo answered. If there was a conflict, Chin Yu's eyes turned cold. Nyo Dingtian glanced at Chin Yu, his eyes full of praise. "At least your courage is not bad. I like it." He stretched out his hand. "You and I are naturally on equal footing. Since we've met, let's sit down and have a chat." Little Meaty nodded. "Chin Yu, come with me." Nyo Dingtian frowned, but didn't object. They sat down at an open-air table outside the heaven-class courtyard. Chin Yu didn't want to sit. After all, the identities of the two people in front of him were frighteningly high. But looking at little Meaty's face, he sat beside her. Nyo Dingtian couldn't help but look at him a few more times. He was clearly surprised. What was his background? Was it because of the 9 bands heavenly Tao that this person in front of him valued him so much? Nyo Dingtian didn't think so. There must be some other reason. He was curious as to what the reason was. At the same time, a thought in his mind became increasingly intense. It seemed that this boy Chin Yu did have some qualifications to be worthy of their Nyo family's little grandaunt. Let's see. Little Meaty suddenly sneered. "You don't have much time left. If things are as I guessed, then let's talk business first." Nyo Dingtian rapped the table, his face calm. "I have already sent a message to the Nyo family. Someone will soon come to bring Daodu home. Before they arrive, I would like to ask you to help me take care of Daodu." He looked up. "You cooperated with me in putting on such a play to force me to appear." You should have been waiting for these words. I don't think you will refuse. Little Meaty didn't seem embarrassed at all that her thoughts had been seen through. She calmly nodded. "I agree, but you should know that my actions have always been expensive." Nyo Dingtian's lips twitched. His complexion wasn't too good. It was likely that he had recalled some unpleasant memories from before. "Since I have spoken, I have already made preparations." "What do you want?" Little Meaty said. "I haven't thought about it yet. I'll write it down for now." Nyo Dingtian rubbed his face. I would rather you ruthlessly cut me down with a saber right now. It's better to be in pain for a few days than to be on tenterhooks in the future. He sighed and stood up. I will entrust Dowdu to you. No matter what, nothing can happen to her. Otherwise, the next time we meet, we will be enemies. With that, Niu Dingtian's figure faded away. Chapter 1681. Red clouds shrouded the sky like a sea of blood. An invisible imprisonment force fell down, sealing off this world and forming a small area. Everyone within this area was sealed, unable to escape. Niu Dingtian opened his eyes and slowly exhaled. His face was solemn. After arriving here, he had felt something was wrong. Now he was sure that he had fallen into the trap of luring the tiger away from the mountain. Thinking of this, Niu Dingtian's eyes became colder. The atmosphere around him was so dense that it almost froze. Dowda's matter had been exposed. If not for this, they wouldn't have taken such a risk. As for who it was, Niu Dingtian knew very well. Because of this, his heart became heavier. Since they had taken action, they would do their best. Although that person had agreed to help, her current state was not the same as before. Nothing must happen to Dowdu. Niu Dingtian's mind raced as a ball of light burst out from his eyes. He stomped heavily on the ground, and the whole mountain collapsed in an instant. The impact of the terrifying power formed a visible tide, roaring and rushing in all directions. The crimson sea of blood above his head seemed to respond. It violently tumbled as if it was boiling. Large amounts of blood energy gushed out, condensing into water droplets in the air. In the blink of an eye, a rain of blood began to fall. Swish, swish, several blurred figures appeared around him at the same time. An invisible force spread out, isolating them from the torrential blood rain. All eyes fell on Niu Dingtian, but they remained silent. There was no surprise or confusion in their eyes. They seemed to have guessed Niu Dingtian's actions. After all, at their level of cultivation, even if they couldn't predict the world with a single thought, they could at least record everything around them in their minds. As long as they revealed a single clue, it wasn't difficult to deduce the general situation. Niu Dingtian was expressionless. He said in a deep voice, "Good plan. The bait you threw out is heavy enough. I admit defeat. You can kill Niu Dowdu, but I will say this first. Emperor Realm experts are not allowed to take action. Otherwise, don't blame me for going crazy." He glanced at the blood sea above his head, a threat written all over his face. Several blurry figures around him were projected here. First, they were far away. Second, Niu Dingtian was indeed an old madman who couldn't be judged with common sense. Even though they were not afraid of him, they were unwilling to engage in a battle of life and death with him here. Putting aside the fact that there was a sea of blood above their heads, there was no way they would allow others to take advantage of the situation. They were all cautious people who had lived for countless years. Naturally, they would not make such a mistake. All right, after a brief silence, the phantoms spoke at the same time. Niu Dingtian narrowed his eyes. "We're old acquaintances, so I won't beat around the bush. Niu Dowdu deserves to die if she's below the Emperor realm. I promise I won't pursue the matter. But if you guys go back on your words, I, Niu Dingtian, swear by the great way that I will drag two of my old friends to the grave with me, even at the cost of my cultivation." The killing intent in the air was monstrous. At this moment, the invisible auras collided with each other. The powerful force that gathered was like a giant hand that actually tore apart the sea of blood in the sky. But very quickly, this crack disappeared, and the sea of blood roiled even more violently, as if it was about to explode in the next moment. The expressions of the descending figures turned grave. The plans in the depths of their hearts were suppressed. To people like them, the binding of a Great Way oath was so strong that they couldn't contend with it. Today, Niu Dingtian had made an oath. Even if he regretted it in the future, there was no way out. If something really went wrong, and he didn't help, he would have to withstand the backlash of the world. Even if he didn't die, his Great Way would be severely damaged. As the saying goes, a promise must be kept, and there was absolutely no room for negotiation. It was referring to the great Tao oath of these people. Shua, shua. The phantom scattered. Above their heads, the tumbling sea of blood in the sky gradually calmed down. Niu Dingtian was expressionless, and his eyes were still heavy. This was all he could do, but it was likely that all of this was within their calculations. If the Emperor realm didn't help, Daodu's chances of survival would be higher. But he still didn't have absolute confidence. Before Niu Dingtian left, he had clearly said something to Niu Daodu. She found Qin Yu and Little Meaty and said, "My old ancestor said that if you two are willing, you can send me on my way." She was a bit embarrassed and had taken the initiative to help. But in the end, the old ancestor had appeared and solved the problem. She had even been scared to tears in front of everyone. Little Meaty nodded. "We are going to the Long Mountain Domain. We will leave today." Niu Daodu was overjoyed. "That's perfect. My home is in that direction, so we won't need to take a detour." She stood up and bid her farewells. She had the two of them wait for a moment as she went to pack some things. Watching Niu Daodu leave, Qin Yu looked at Little Meaty. She lightly said, "Niu Dingtian didn't tell the truth because he didn't want her to be afraid." Qin Yu coughed. "Just what is going on? I'm also confused." Little Meaty glanced at him. "Don't worry. Since I told you before, I will naturally tell you." She poured herself a cup of tea and slowly drank several sips. "The Niu family is very strong. I chose to forcefully sell a favor to Niu Dingtian. In the future, you will know just how expensive a favor is." I don't know the specifics, but based on what I know and what happened, I can roughly guess the general outline. The Niu family is already strong enough. There are some people who don't want to see them become even stronger, lest they ruin their own interests. Thus, they set up a trap ahead of time to lead Niu Dingtian away, so that there would be a vacuum in the strength protecting Niu Daodu. Qin Yu wanted to say something, but hesitated. Little Meaty glanced at him. Niu Dingtian's projection is indeed very strong. So strong that even an Emperor Realm expert could protect Niu Daodu's life. But the problem is that his projection is too strong. Thus, after descending once, it will take time for him to descend a second time. Qin Yu's eyes brightened. "Spiritual Master Yushan?" Little Meaty said, "He's just a pitiful pawn. He's so afraid of death that he's still in the dark." This trap was set up very early. Golden Toad Palace's Sun Yuhuan could be considered coincidence. Of course, there are very few coincidences in this world. Most of them are arranged by others. Even without Sun Yuhuan, Wang Yuhuan, Zhang Yuhuan, and so on will still appear. The goal is to make Spiritual Master Yushan attack and lure out Niu Dingtian's avatar. Then, with his own life, he will create an advantageous situation to kill Niu Daodu. Qin Yu thought for a moment. Is Niu Daodu's cultivation talent really that good? Little Meaty nodded. You've seen Miaoya's talent. Niu Daodu can probably match up to 100 Miaoya. A trace of disappointment appeared on her face as she looked at Qin Yu. If you had half of Niu Daodu's talent, it would be a matter of time before you reach Emperor Realm in 30 years. You wouldn't have to go through all this trouble. Qin Yu rubbed his nose after being ridiculed. He had completely understood Niu Daodu's shocking talent. No wonder some people in the Middle Desolate couldn't sit still. Niu Dingtian of the Niu family was already so powerful. If another Niu Daodu rose up, SSS, just thinking about it made him panic. Qin Yu said, "Can you guess who it was that attacked?" Little Meaty's lips curled into a cold smile. "It's simple. If the Niu family continues to grow stronger, whoever's interests are affected will be the mastermind." Qin Yu licked his lips. For sex and 4 families? Before entering the central desolate divine continent, he had done a detailed understanding of the power layout in this vast world. Apart from the Qin Empire, there were only 8 factions under the heavens. The 8 powers mentioned were the strongest, and each one was a hegemon who dominated a region. Little Meaty nodded. They might not have all acted, but this matter is definitely related to them. Qin Yu rubbed his face and looked at Little Meaty in front of him. He really wanted to say, "Let's hurry up and run away." For sex and 4 families. Any one of them was a colossus that could shake the heavens and earth with a single stamp of their feet. If the two of us were to clash with them head-on, there would be no other outcome than being smashed to pieces. After all, Little Meaty's current state was different from before. She herself had said that she was in the ruler realm. If she wanted to erupt with even greater strength, she would have to pay an additional price. Chinyu didn't want her to suffer because of this matter. Little Meaty glanced at him, clearly guessing his thoughts. Now you know fear? It's too late. Nioding Tian has always been reliable. He entrusted Niu Daodu to us. If this girl dies, we'll be the first to suffer. Chinyu had a sullen expression. You already knew about this, so why did you still get involved? Why didn't we just run away earlier? Little Meaty snorted. Useless. Didn't you hear the favor I told you just now? It won't be easy to make Niu Dingtian owe me a debt, especially when he suffered at my hands back then. Do you think he would have agreed otherwise for Niu Daodu's sake? Don't worry, it's not a sure-death situation. Since I've agreed, I naturally have some confidence. Nioding Tian must have sensed something was amiss when he made his move. He will help us block the greatest wave of danger. Others will definitely make their move next, but the strongest will only be at Daoist Yushan's level. There won't be any Emperor Realm cultivators. Qin Yu's eyes lit up. If that was really the case, it wasn't impossible to give it a try. If an Emperor Realm cultivator didn't make a move, then it would be a ruler. Little Meaty was a ruler, and different from ordinary rulers. With her overseeing things, wouldn't anyone who came would die? When he thought about it this way, the difficulty of this matter dropped exponentially. Little Meaty sneered. What are you thinking? If it was so simple, I wouldn't have to explain so much to you. She lifted her head to look at the sky. The Middle Desolate is a place with deep waters. Who knows how many tens of thousands of years of turtles and old bastards are hidden here. If I make a move and they discover my traces, it will be a disaster in the blink of an eye. Don't doubt me. I dare to reveal my identity to Niu Dingtian because I was confident that he wouldn't do anything even if he found out. But others, you'll be the first to suffer. Qin Yu smiled wryly. So you're saying that I have to make a move this time? Little Meaty nodded with a matter-of-fact expression. Qin Yu couldn't help but rub his face a few more times. Finally, he took a deep breath and nodded heavily. After all, this was his own business. Little Meaty had helped him set it up, and it was already a great favor. He couldn't always think of a ready-made one. Moreover, Qin Yu felt that with his current strength, as long as an Emperor Realm cultivator didn't make a move, he wouldn't be afraid of a ruler. You got guts, kid. Don't worry, I'll hold the line for you. I won't watch you get beaten to death. Fine. The little bit of confidence that he had just gained was completely shattered by Little Meaty's words. A moment later, Niu Daodu finished packing and came over with the siblings, Yuan Qin and Yuan Hu. She had obviously told the siblings about what had happened at the Longsong River. When the siblings saw Qin Yu, they knelt on the ground with faces full of gratitude. Qin Yu didn't stop them. He had accepted their kneeling. He didn't ask for anything else in return for saving his life. So what was wrong with kneeling? All right, we could talk about other things later. Let's go, Qin Yu said with a smile. Miao had already returned to Little Meaty's side. Under Hua Xiangrong's respectful escort, the group boarded the carriage to the dock. Chapter 1682. On the way, Qin Yu asked another question. Why don't we stay in the main city? If something happens to Niu Daodu here, the Great Qin will not want to be implicated, so they will definitely intervene, right? If the Qin Empire intervened, the threat of the 4 sects and 4 families would be reduced by another level. If the Qin clan truly had such confidence, the Qin clan would not be the one enjoying the throne of Great Qin. In the central desolate divine province, the strongest nation was still the Qin Empire. Little Meaty's words made Qin Yu understand. How do you know that the Qin Empire did not acquiesce in this matter? Qin Yu's heart chilled. If this was the case, then staying in the main city was truly dangerous. Who knew what would happen next? Moreover, since Little Meaty said this, it should not be groundless. It seemed that the Qin Empire and the Niu family had some dirty relations. Thinking of this, Yu could not help but sigh inwardly. Indeed, in this world, no one could truly sit back and relax. Niu Ding Tian was so powerful, but the Niu family still had enemies everywhere. If they were not careful, they could be schemed against. He had to be more careful in the future. He could not relax just because little Meaty was by his side. After all, although she was unfathomable, she was not omniscient. The journey was smooth. The two carriages arrived at the pier. The ferry to the Long Mountain region had already arrived. Yu left the deposit and smoothly bought 3 tickets. Niu Dedu, Yuan Qin, and Yuan, who had suddenly chosen to take the ferry, but the tickets had already been sold out. Yu did not have the chance to make things difficult for them, because Niu Daodu had perfectly demonstrated what it meant to be rich and overbearing. She directly took out money and forcefully knocked down a guest who had already been booked on the top deck of the ferry. Seeing the person in front of him change from an angry expression to a smiling face and voluntarily give up the room, Yu once again recognized the power of money. According to Niu Daodu, although the Niu family had some wealth, they could not be considered the true moneybags of the Central Desolate region. She said that in the great Qin Empire's capital, Xianyang, there was a family surnamed Feng. They were known as the Great Qin Empire's second revenue department, a true sea of gold and silver. They had wealth that could not be spent in hundreds of lifetimes. What impressed Yu the most was that Niu Daodu told him that the Feng clan had 2 half-emperor stage powerhouses. One of them was an ancestor of the Feng clan, and the other was a rogue cultivator. Here was the main point. Originally, these 2 sovereigns could only cultivate to the peak of the sovereign realm. It would have been difficult for them to step into the heaven, earth, and mortal realms. Yet, they had forcefully used money to raise their cultivation to half-step emperors. Yu's face was filled with amazement. It was hard to imagine just how much wealth was needed to create 2 half-emperors. Just the thought of it was inconceivable. Little Meaty looked at Yu. You think this is unbelievable? I'll reveal another secret. A half-step emperor realm expert who was raised with money only had an empty cultivation realm. His little world was sloppy and ordinary, and there were countless flaws in it. Even a peak sovereign realm expert couldn't be trapped in it. However, the Feng family was sitting on a huge amount of wealth. In order to avoid being coveted by others and protect their own interests, what could they do? It's simple. They would continue to throw money at these 2 half-step emperors and arm them to the teeth. Then, when the 2 of them joined forces, they would be able to fight a true emperor. Doesn't that sound even harder to believe? This information was confirmed by Niu Daodu. Her eyes widened and she nodded. Big Sister Meaty is right. My old ancestor also mentioned that the Feng family's 2 half-step emperors are like 2 moving treasuries. Even he couldn't help but be envious of them. It was only after she finished speaking that she realized she had revealed something. Niu Daodu blushed red and hurriedly explained, "The old ancestor only said that. He never did anything." Little Meaty curled her lips. "That's because your old ancestor knows that even if he did, there wouldn't be any consequences. I know you don't believe me. When we meet in the future, you can ask him yourself and see if I'm right or not." Niu Daodu bit her lips and didn't speak. Although the old ancestor sometimes gave off an unreliable feeling, he was still extremely good to her. Yu coughed lightly. "All right, I just asked. The ferry will arrive soon. Let's not find a place to rest. Let's find a place to sit and wait for a while." After changing the topic, the group found a tea house at the docks. Yu looked calm on the surface, but his heart was tense. After all, no one knew when an assassin would jump out. Fortunately, Little Meaty was here. In terms of perception, no one under the Emperor realm should be able to hide from her. But just as he had said, he couldn't be careless because of this. He couldn't be lacking in the necessary caution. There were many people in the tea house. Most of them were cultivators waiting for the ferry or strolling around the docks. They were drinking tea and chatting, so the atmosphere was relatively peaceful. The servant was incomparably enthusiastic. He invited the guest to take a seat and recited the names of 7 or 8 teas in a single breath. His eloquence was quite good. Yu had never heard of any of them, but he appeared very calm as he casually recited one of the names. When the tea was served, the maid Yuan Qin took the initiative to lift the teapot and pour tea for Qin Yu and little Meaty before turning to give it to her young miss. The young girl was precocious and had experienced the pain of losing her parents. She had matured at an early age, so she could naturally tell that the two people in front of her were no ordinary people. For example, back at the Heavenly Fragrance residence, everyone had knelt on the ground to thank the old ancestor for saving their lives. However, the two people in front of them hadn't knelt. The fact that they hadn't knelt meant that they didn't think that they needed the old ancestor to save their lives. The old ancestor's subsequent actions had clearly tacitly acknowledged this point. Therefore, the old ancestor had asked these two to send the young miss on her way. This matter wasn't as simple as it seemed. Yuanhu stood next to his sister, his eyes constantly sweeping towards Miaoya. Unfortunately, Miaoya's face was expressionless and cold from beginning to end. This made the young man feel a bit depressed. Some emotions that had just sprouted were scratching at his mind and making him restless. Yuan Qin put down the teapot and respectfully retreated to the side. She reached out to discreetly pull Yuanhu and looked at him sternly. Yuanhu completely wilted under his sister's glare. His head drooped listlessly. Niu Daodu picked up a teacup. But at this time, little Meaty suddenly said, "Wait a moment. I suddenly think that the patterns on your teacup are quite nice. Let's change cups." Before she could object, Niu Daodu's hand was empty. She didn't know what had happened, but the cup had fallen into her hand. Little Meaty took a sip and narrowed her eyes. "It really does taste good." Qin Yu was startled. He swept his eyes around the tea shop and didn't find the young servant who had greeted them just now. A chill gushed out from the depths of his heart. Qin Yu took a deep breath and didn't reveal on his face. Niu Daodu glanced at little Meaty and then at Qin Yu. She obediently picked up another cup of tea, not saying anything. Luckily, everything was calm after this and nothing else happened. When the fairy slowly flew over from afar, casting a massive shadow over the ground, Qin Yu paid the bill and left the tea shop. "There's poison in the tea?" Qin Yu asked with a sound transmission. Little Meaty nodded. Qin Yu's eyes widened. Little Meaty's lips curved up. "If I don't drink it, how can I kill someone? I haven't encountered such an interesting poison in a long time." In an underground chamber of the tea shop, the young servant who had served them tea was now sitting cross-legged. His face was pale and his body was shivering. Suddenly, the young servant's eyes flashed open. His eyes were crimson, and the countless tiny blood vessels on the surface had all swelled up and burst open. There was a pained howl before it came to an abrupt end. The young servant's corpse fell to the ground, rotting away at a speed visible to the naked eye. There were two other people in the dark chamber. As they looked at the dead young servant, a dignified expression appeared on their faces. Even the people from Myriad Poison Valley have no way to kill him with poison. One of them lightly said. The other person said, "Tell them to carry out the second plan." But at this time, the complexions of the two people changed. With a loud bang, the blood on the ground exploded outwards. A scarlet fog of blood instantly swept out, covering the entire dark chamber. Before the two people could dodge, they were enveloped within. As soon as they realized something was wrong, the two of them had already held their breath and released their strength to isolate themselves from the outside world. Even so, this blood fog still penetrated through every pore and forcefully drilled into their bodies. Their eyes widened and their hands grasped their necks. Deep in their throats, the two of them emitted several groaning sounds before they died. This was because Niu Daodu had used money to buy a small courtyard on a ferry. There were enough rooms for several people to live in. Before Qin Yu boarded the ferry, he had already sold the tickets in his hands. The ones who bought the tickets were a young couple. The woman was holding a baby in her arms. Qin Yu originally wanted to sell the tickets to someone else, but after looking at them several times, he turned around and sold them to them. The price was even lower than what they had agreed on before. The young couple thanked him and boarded the ferry first, their faces full of joy. Qin Yu watched as the two left with the baby. He subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Don't copy me. Your eyes aren't large to begin with. If you narrow them again, there will only be slits left. Little Meaty expressionlessly said. Qin Yu choked. He thought that he should be the one saying these words. Moreover, my eyes are mine. I can narrow them if I want to. What does it have to do with you? Cough. Forget it. Men should be a bit more broad-minded. It's not like I'll lose weight if I say a few words. Umph. Little Meaty coldly sneered. She gave Qin Yu a look that said, at least you're tactful. After smoothly boarding the ferry, they were led to the small courtyard on the top floor by the ferry cultivators. The size of the ferry that crossed regions was astonishingly large. If Qin Yu had taken one before, it would have been comparable to a small town. If so, then this interstate ferry of the Heavenly Sea sect was like a small city, complete with all sorts of buildings. On the way to board the ship, Qin Yu even saw several brothels that were connected together on a long street. The place was bustling with noise and excitement. But what was most surprising was that the Heavenly Sea sect's ferry was actually a living creature, an incomparably massive blue armored crab. Its two massive pincers shined with a metallic luster. They were like two small mountains, and just looking at them caused one to feel a chill run down their spine. The other 8 legs followed some sort of rhythm, constantly swaying up and down in the air. They carried all the buildings on the crab's shell and floated in the air as if they were on flat ground. After sending away the Heavenly Sea sect cultivators, Little Meaty looked down at her feet. She subconsciously stuck out her tongue and gently licked her lips. This was the Bering Mountain crab. This was one of the rare ancient species that had lived for at least 10,000 years. It must have accumulated a great deal of crab roe. The ferry suddenly swayed, causing many cries of alarm. The Heavenly Sea sect cultivators shot into the skies and hurriedly investigated the cause. Fortunately, the Bering Mountain crab would soon calm down and no major problems would arise. The Heavenly Sea sect cultivators comforted their guests as they continued to investigate. Unfortunately, they still didn't find anything. The ferry stayed at the main city's pier for half a day. After a series of detailed inspections and confirming that there was nothing wrong, it rose into the air and left. The Bering Mountain crab's 8 legs were like giant oars. They slid through the air and carried everyone away. In the courtyard on the top floor, Qin Yu continued to cultivate. According to Little Meaty's words, what would come sooner or later. If he hid now and accumulated a bit of strength, he would have a higher chance of victory in the future. These calm words caused Qin Yu's mind to tense up, and an intense sense of urgency rose within him. He knew that the poisoning in the tea house at the pier was only the beginning. There would be countless troubles before the Ox family's reinforcements arrived. Chapter 1683. Langya City, City Lore Mansion. Region Lord. The Heavenly Sea sect's ferry has left the city. The Region Lord's eyes flashed. He thought for a moment and said, Announce to the public that I have gained enlightenment in my cultivation and will be going into seclusion from today onwards. All the Region Lords in the Great Qin Empire were given the title of Marquis to show their respect. Some of the more important places even had Region Lords with royal titles. Of course, the royal titles of the Great Qin Empire were still very valuable. Only those who crossed the threshold of the celestial realm were qualified to be conferred a title. The Region Lord was a true feudal official. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he had a high position. However, Huang Yin wasn't willing to bear Niu Dingtian's anger. He went into seclusion, and nothing that happened in the outside world could be blamed on him. The Heavenly Sea sect was a large sect in the Endless Sea region. It had been around for more than 10,000 years. It had a deep foundation and a wide network. Because of this, the sect was able to make a lot of money from the ferry business that spanned across several regions. After all, the ferry didn't just carry passengers, it also carried a lot of goods. It was normal for people to be envious of it because they were making money from both sides. Every year, there would be some accidents big and small during the voyage. Thankfully, the Heavenly Sea sect was prepared for this. The steward of the ferry was a peaked sovereign elder who had already stepped into the heavenly realm. He lived on the ferry and spent most of his time in the nine heavens, which was beneficial to his cultivation. A heavenly realm sovereign was enough to suppress a region. Naturally, a small fairy couldn't cause any trouble. Moreover, while the mountain-bearing crab was the heavenly sea sect's money tree, he was also a great demon with an ancient mutated bloodline. Although it was carrying the fairy steadily and looked harmless, if an accident really happened, its 2 pincers and 8 long legs could tear apart the entire mountain range in the blink of an eye. Its combat strength was extremely fierce. In the main city of the Langia region, the sudden movement of the fairy seemed to have passed. But in reality, the Heavenly Sea sect was still investigating, trying to find the truth of the matter. This was an order given by the Patriarch after communicating with Changshan Crab. No one knew the specific details. They only knew that the Patriarch's face was solemn that day. "Elder, we have already secretly inspected the fairy. We did not find anything amiss. Do you think we should continue?" A Heavenly Sea sect cultivator asked respectfully. Deng Haiba frowned and pondered for a moment before slowly saying, "Continue the investigation." Down below, the expressions of the Heavenly Sea sect cultivators changed slightly. They responded, bowed, and then turned to leave. "Elder, regarding this matter, you'd better give your subordinates an explanation. If you continue on like this, they'll be overly suspicious, and I'm afraid their hearts will be shaken." The assistant on the ferry pondered for a moment before giving a reminder. Deng Haiba shook his head. "I can't tell them the details for now. In short, we must be extra careful in our next journey." "Yes, I will give the order." Waving his hand to dismiss him, Deng Haiba leaned against the railing and looked at the vast sea of clouds in front of him. He felt a sense of gloom shrouding his heart. The aura wasn't strong, but it carried a strong sense of foreboding. Recalling what he had learned from the mountain-bearing crab, his face turned even more grim. Hopefully, everything will go smoothly. Beside Niu Daodu was the youth Yuanhu. He couldn't restrain his youthful temperament. The streets on the ferry where stalls were rented out were his favorite places to stroll. He didn't buy much. He mainly wanted to watch the excitement and see many interesting people and things. On the 4th time he went out alone, this interesting matter was discovered by Niu Daodu. She didn't have much interest in trading stalls. The main reason was that Yuanhu had said that there were many food stalls opened by cultivators on the streets where stalls were rented out, and they all tasted quite good. As Niu Daodu saw the youth nearly drool as he spoke, she immediately decided that she also wanted to see this place. The young girl, Yuan Qin, glared at her little brother. She tried to persuade him several times, but was unable to stop him. She took advantage of the time when the young miss was washing up and changing her clothes to find the idle little Misty, who was nibbling on a fruit, and explained the situation. "I'll go with you." Little Misty threw away the fruit core in her hand and stood up. Yuan Qin revealed a happy expression. She expressed her thanks for her young miss, but she couldn't help but glance at Qin Yu's room. Little Misty glanced at her and lightly said, "He isn't going." Yuan Qin couldn't help but feel a bit disappointed. Little Misty's lips curved up, a faint smile on her face. She thought that this little girl had good eyes, but unfortunately, a bean sprout like her definitely wouldn't have a chance. When Niu Daodu saw little Misty, she revealed a surprised expression. But she didn't ask anything. Reynolds Street. The taste was really good. Niu Daodu's hands were full of skewers. She took one bite after another, happily eating. As she felt the impact on her taste buds, she couldn't help but blissfully close her eyes. On the first day, they ate through half the street. Niu Daodu patted her belly in satisfaction. She praised the young Yuanhu, saying that he had found a good place. The second day was a repeat of the first. Then came the third day. The young girl, Yuan Qin, was careful. Her eyes swept over little Misty, who was holding a skewer and taking small bites. She relaxed. Luckily, it seemed that this person wasn't impatient at all. Rather, he seemed to be enjoying it. At last, on the 4th day of the ferry boat's journey, they came across an injustice. A young couple with an infant in swaddling clothes rented a stall on the ferry and made rice cakes, a specialty of their hometown. After stir-frying, the rice cakes had a rosy color and a pleasant aroma. In just a few days, they became famous and attracted a large number of customers. On the second day, little Meaty ate their fried rice cakes and exclaimed how delicious they were. In the next few days, whenever she came, she would buy one, sometimes two, sometimes three. Good business caused trouble. Today's trouble was that a customer had eaten a bug while eating the fried rice cakes. They didn't stop and caused a great commotion. The onlookers looked at the young couple in the stall, and their expressions turned ugly. Finally, the cultivators of the Heavenly Sea sect on the ferry were alarmed. After investigating the cause and effect, they looked at the nervous and aggrieved young couple, and then at the infant in swaddling clothes in their arms. There was a hint of embarrassment on their faces. They had already investigated. The ingredients used to make the rice cakes were high-quality, white, glutinous rice. Although it didn't contain much spiritual energy, it was still worth the money. All the ingredients used for stir-frying were produced by immortals, and there were no problems with hygiene. They all knew the troublemaker before them. He was a relative of one of the deputy stewards on the ferry. He spent most of his time on the ferry, and there were dozens of various food stalls on the rental street. Although the stalls weren't big, they produced quite a lot of food. It was obvious whether the deputy steward had share in them. They felt that the matter was a little tricky. After exchanging glances, the people of the Heavenly Sea sect came to a conclusion. They hadn't found any violation of the rules on the fried rice cake stall, but since someone had eaten a bug, the matter needed to be investigated. They had the young couple remove their stall and wait for the matter to be investigated. Not imposing any punishment was already their limit. If they removed their stall, it would affect the couple's business in the future, but they couldn't care less. Of course, the people of the Heavenly Sea sect did this to protect the ferry's reputation. After all, not everyone among the onlookers couldn't see the truth. The crowd dispersed. The troublemaker had gotten what he wanted and no longer demanded compensation. He had long since disappeared. The infant in his swaddling clothes had woken up with a start and was crying loudly. The young wife hugged him and patted him with red eyes. The husband's face was full of grief and indignation. But after glancing at his wife, he decided to lower his head and endure it. As he was tidying up his stall, he suddenly sensed someone approaching. He looked up and recognized the person. It was a customer he had been visiting for the past few days. He squeezed out a smile. "I'm sorry. There's been some trouble. I can't set up my stall anymore. I'm really sorry." Neodaudu looked aggrieved. "I saw what happened just now. The Heavenly Sea sect handled things unfairly. Your fried rice cake was clearly very clean." The husband smiled bitterly and lowered his voice. "Miss, speak softly. If they hear you, it won't be good if you cause trouble." "Oomph." Neodaudu snorted coldly. Yuan Qin tugged at her sleeve and wrinkled her nose a few times. She said, "I know. Don't cause trouble when you're outside." Looking at the stall owner, Neodaudu rolled her eyes. "That's right. Listen to me. I live in a small courtyard on the ferry. There's an area in front of the courtyard. It's the garden area of the courtyard. If I invite you there to fry rice cakes, the Heavenly Sea sect won't say anything." The young wife's eyes lit up when she heard this. She turned to look at her husband. The man thought for a moment. He looked hesitant. "I'm afraid the guests won't be used to fried rice cakes. And if I set up a stall there, it'll be noisy and the smell of smoke will be strong." Neodaudu waved her hand. "Can't I set up a stall in my garden? Don't worry. There won't be any problems. As for whether they'll be used to it, boss, you're underestimating your own skills. Don't worry. If business isn't good, I'll make it up to you." The man quickly waved his hand. He didn't dare. Neodaudu nodded with a smile. "Then it's settled. You'll set up your stall tomorrow. It'll be at the end of this street. I'll have him pick you up." As she spoke, she pointed at Yuan Hu. The young man nodded. "Your fried rice cake is delicious." "It's delicious." The young couple thanked her profusely. After tidying up their stall, they left with their child in the cart. From beginning to end, Meaty ate in small bites, her expression unchanged. Having done another good deed, Neodaudu was in a good mood. Although she didn't get to eat her favorite fried rice cake, Her appetite was still great. After tasting over a dozen different snacks, she happily returned home. The next day, the young Yuan who left early. He soon returned with a cautious young couple. The small courtyards on the top floor of the ferry were expensive to rent. Those who lived here were either rich or noble, so it was understandable that the two were nervous. Under Niu Daodu's urging, the fried rice cake stall opened. Niu Daodu ordered the first portion. She ate a piece and nodded repeatedly. She gave a thumbs up. "Boss, your fried rice cake skills are amazing." At this moment, she began to seriously consider whether or not she should invite them to follow her home when they disembarked from the ferry. Otherwise, it would be difficult for her to eat such delicious fried rice cakes in the future. A fried rice cake stall appeared on the top floor of the ferry. This matter wasn't too big or too small. Someone from the Heavenly Sea sect came to ask about it. Niu Daodu pointed outside the courtyard. "This place is my garden, isn't it? I didn't damage anything on the ferry. I'm just setting up a stall here to earn some pocket money. Why do you care? I heard that the fairies of your Heavenly Sea sect have always been very reasonable." The Heavenly Sea sect cultivators were rendered speechless by her words. They could only remind them not to make too much noise. If they disturbed the rest of the other customers, they would be put in a difficult position. Niu Daodu patted her chest. She assured them that nothing would happen. After finishing one portion of fried rice cake, she ate a second and third portion. After thinking for a moment, she suppressed her embarrassment and ate a fourth portion. According to her logic, she had made up for what she hadn't eaten yesterday. Business was unexpectedly good. Firstly, there were probably very few customers in the small courtyard area on the top floor. After eating the stall snacks, it was full of novelty. Secondly, the young man's cooking skills were indeed quite good. This could be confirmed from how many portions Misty had eaten before and after. Thirdly, it was because of Niu Daodu's identity. Perfected Yushan had dominated the Langya region. There was no way to completely cover up the fact that he had died in the Heavenly Fragrance restaurant. Even if most people didn't dare to casually leak the news about Niu Dingtian, it still spread in a small circle. The fairy had hesitated for a moment before agreeing without hesitation. It was crucial that the fried rice cake stall was placed on the top floor of the ferry. Should they try it with someone else? As for why they hesitated, of course, it was to express that this matter wasn't easy. They only agreed because of Miss Niu. This was called giving a favor. Most of the customers in the small courtyard on the top floor had extraordinary backgrounds and many information channels. Most of them had also heard about what the fairy knew. Of course, they didn't mind taking this opportunity to build a relationship with this young lady from the Niu family. Putting everything else aside, the fact that Niu Dingtian had descended and killed Perfected Yushan was enough to show that Niu Daodu was highly valued. This was worth investing in. In summary, the rice cake stall on the top floor of the ferry had a booming business on the first day. Niu Daodu was extremely satisfied with her foresight and the accuracy of her analysis. Of course, she wasn't really stupid. She could sense that many people were deliberately trying to get close to her. But frankly speaking, Niu Daodu had experienced this kind of thing many times since she was young. She didn't care at all. It was fine to chat, but if you want to make friends through this method, sorry, you're thinking too much. As for a few young people who were gorgeously dressed and trying their best to get close to her, Niu Daodu had blacklisted them from the very beginning. However, things weren't absolute. On the third day after the fried rice cake stall was moved to the top floor, Niu Daodu made a friend. It was a beautiful young lady. Although she didn't reveal her identity, judging from her behavior, it was obvious that she had a background. Of course, Niu Daodu didn't look at background when she made friends, because most of them were younger than her. The main reason was that this young lady was very pleasing to the eye, and they got along very well. The two of them had eaten rice cakes together twice, and basically hit it off at first sight. A few days later, Niu Daodu began to be inseparable from Shu Huan. They wandered around the ferry together and found a few excellent places to eat. After discovering that both of them had the same food preferences and similar tastes, the two of them hit it off more and more. Little Ro moved a chair and sat at the entrance of the small courtyard. While basking in the sun, She watched what was happening in front of her with great interest. She found it very interesting. Chapter 1684. The route of the ferry was basically fixed. Every important region along the route required many years of operation to ensure its safety. The Heavenly Sea Sect's route had been open for more than 1,000 years, and they had already established good relationships with the various parties. Although the journey was long, it was not too dangerous. Safety was the most important thing for any ferry. It was because of this that the Heavenly Sea Sect had been able to earn so much in recent years. Apart from that, the ferryboat's ability to make money was also because it allowed one to purchase items that were difficult for ordinary cultivators to obtain during the voyage. For example, at the border between the Langia region and the Shanming region, there was the Broken Sky mountain range, which was shrouded in dense fog all year round. The reason it was named Broken Sky was because the mountain was so steep that it pierced through the clouds, causing one's heart to tremble with fear. Another reason was that the fog here had the strange ability to isolate one's senses and distort one's aura. Cultivators could easily get lost in it. The Broken Sky mountain range was one of the few autonomous territories left to the demon race after the humans ruled over the world. It was rumored that there were ancient people hidden there, which was why the fog covered the mountains all year round. The Broken Sky mountain range was an autonomous territory of the demon race. It had been ruled by the demon race for a long time, and because of its special aura and environment, many precious treasures had been produced. Many years ago, there were even human cultivators who would secretly enter the Broken Sky mountain range, trying to make a fortune without any cost. There were indeed people who succeeded, but most of them stayed in the mountain range, never to leave again. As time passed, the Broken Sky mountain range gradually became one of the forbidden areas for human cultivators. Of course, this was also because the Qin Empire kept its promise when it was founded. Otherwise, who could resist the pressure of an army? After all, the demon race was just yesterday's flower. Back to the main topic. For some unknown reason, the ancestor of the Heavenly Sea Sect had befriended a great demon race in the Broken Sky mountain range. From then on, the ferry obtained a right to enter the Broken Sky mountain range. Although the ancestor of the Heavenly Sea Sect had long since passed away, their many years of cooperation had allowed their friendship to continue. Entering and leaving the Broken Sky mountain range was the most important thing for the Heavenly Sea Sect's ferry. The day before the ferry arrived at the Broken Heaven mountain range, the Heavenly Sea Sect had already informed everyone in detail of the things to take note of when entering the mountain range. Some of the things that violated the taboos of the demonic race were clearly and impolitely explained. To put it simply, whoever caused trouble would be punished. The Heavenly Sea Sect would not ruin their relationship with the demon clan of the Broken Sky mountain range. The atmosphere on the ferry was a little tense, but most people were still excited. Being able to enter and leave the Broken Sky mountain range was the key reason why many people chose to take the Heavenly Sea Sect's ferry. This was because as guests on the ship, they could come into contact with some of the monster race and purchase items that were rare in the outside world from them. Although the price was not cheap, it was still a bargain compared to the market price outside. If he was lucky, he might even be able to earn back his ticket price. Chini was awakened by a knock on the door. He opened his eyes and got up to open the door. Outside the door, Little Meat's voice was calm. You have to prepare yourself. This mountain in front of you is a good place to make your move. Chin Yu's heart chilled. His eyes fell on the vast mountain range in front of him that was shrouded in fog that extended for thousands of miles. What should I do? Little Meaty said, I don't know. Chin Yu rubbed his face. In other words, I can only act according to the situation and counter every move. Little Meaty nodded. More or less. Be careful. The Central Desolate cannot be compared to other places. There are many unexpected things that happen, so don't fail miserably. He paused for a moment and continued to say, This time, I won't do anything, but I will stay by Nyo Dowdu's side and solve some small problems. Chingy took a deep breath. I understand. Just as the two of them were conversing, the sky around them suddenly darkened. The fairy was like a large fish, quietly slipping into the fog. The heavenly sea sect elder Deng Haiba held a token of the sect in his hand. He stood at the bow of the fairy. The token in his hand seemed to be polished from a piece of bone. The texture was exquisite, and it had many holes. As he stood at the bow, the wind blew past him, making short, whistling sounds. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew past them. The fog in front of them tumbled and tumbled. Then, a monster with wings on his back flew onto the fairy. Deng Haiba clearly recognized this person. He smiled and cupped his hands together. "Flying bird, my friend, we meet again." The monster at the bow smiled and nodded. Calculating the time, "Your heavenly sea sect's fairy should be arriving soon. Let's go." The pier has already been prepared, but there's been a bit of an accident this time. I fear you will have to stay in the mountains for another day and leave tomorrow. Deng Haiba laughed. "If I want to, I would rather stay in the mountains for a year." The monster called Flying Bird couldn't help but roll his eyes. "I fear that at that time, even the skies will be 3 feet higher." From the situation, it seemed the two of them had a good relationship. This was the first time a cultivator rode the heavenly sea sect's fairy. As he saw Deng Haiba and the monster chatting happily from afar, he immediately relaxed. After all, seeing was better than hearing. The fairy continued onwards. Around an hour later, the thick fog in front of them vanished. 9 suns appeared overhead, sprinkling down golden light. A simple pier appeared in front of the fairy, and further away, there was a monster city built deep in the mountains. It occupied a massive area, and the surface of the city walls were covered with traces of the passage of time. At a glance, one could tell that it had existed for a very long time. Qin Yu narrowed his eyes. His gaze fell on the city. He could faintly sense some strange fluctuations of aura coming from within. Thinking for a moment, his eyes fell on little Meaty. He saw that there was a rare, earnest look on her face. "What is it?" Little Meaty thought for a moment. "In this monster city, there's a fae that is about to be born. A fae is also a monster, but it is not an ordinary monster. Rather, it is a monster spirit that can only be born in a place rich in monster energy after countless years." Her eyes fell on Qin Yu. "Be careful. If anything happens to this fae, the monster races of the Broken Heaven Mountain Range will definitely go crazy." Qin Yu's complexion changed. He thought of a possibility and hesitated. "Since we've guessed that something like this might happen, can we prevent it in advance?" Little Meaty shook her head. "I can't. This sort of monster spirit has an extremely sharp perception. If I do anything, we will immediately be in trouble." The fairy came to a stop. The bird spoke a few words to Deng Haiba before spreading its wings and flying away. His mission was to guide the fairy safely to this place and use his own aura to deter the monsters in the mountains so that they wouldn't attack the fairy. After all, although most of the monster races of the Broken Heaven Mountain Range had developed spiritual wisdom, some of them hated humans to the extreme. If they didn't take precautions ahead of time, it was easy to cause an accident. Deng Haiba personally repeated the taboo that the fairy had warned everyone about. He also told everyone that the only area they could move about in was the area where the fairy was located. If someone crossed this area, their safety would not be guaranteed, and they would have to bear the consequences themselves. Every time the fairy arrived, it would complete a year's worth of transactions with the monster races of the Broken Heaven Mountain Range. Luckily, the Heavenly Sea Sect cultivators were already very experienced in these matters. They had already gathered together with the monsters responsible for the monster races and began to coordinate with them. After this, the fairy began to let people disembark. Every guest that disembarked needed to obtain a stone that represented their status. Only with this could they move about in the area of the pier. When this stone was distributed, the Heavenly Sea Sect cultivators would solemnly warn that they must not lose this stone. If they lost it, they must immediately return to the fairy, or else they might be in danger. Nyo Daudu really wanted to disembark and see for herself. She had long heard of the Broken Heaven Mountain Range. Unfortunately, this idea was rejected by Little Meaty without hesitation. According to her, Niu Dingtian wanted her to help him. They would help her and give her a ride, but they couldn't do anything too risky. Bringing up Niu Dingtian didn't work. Niu Daodu had never been afraid since she was young, but when she saw little Meaty's expression, she couldn't help but feel nervous. She opened her mouth a few times, but couldn't find the words to protest. She could only turn around and go back to her room to sulk. Luckily, Shu Huan also decided to stay on the ferry after learning about this. According to her, although the Heavenly Sea sect had a good relationship with the monster races of the Broken Heaven mountain range, it would be risky to leave the ferry. It was better to stay and eat some of the monster race's delicacies. These words caused Niu Daodu's eyes to brighten. Monster race's delicacies? She hesitated. Can those things be eaten? Shu Huan nodded. They're delicious. I have a chef at home who was once captured by the monster races and learned their culinary skills. Although I'm not used to some of their dishes, most of them have a unique flavor. Where to eat? Where to eat? Niu Daodu's dejected expression was swept away. Shu Huan turned her head. A maid beside her respectfully said, Miss, this servant has already communicated with the ferry management. They will help you purchase it, and it will be delivered soon. Qin thought for a moment. He decided to leave the ferry and wander around the pier. At the very least, he could observe the surrounding terrain and sense the arrangements the monster races had made at the pier. Little Meaty had already warned him before, so it definitely wasn't an empty threat. Once an accident occurred, he would have to be prepared so he wouldn't panic. The Heavenly Sea sect cultivator who gave him the stone had a dignified expression. You must take good care of the stone. Even if the monster races ask for it, ignore them. Return immediately, and the ferry will be fine. Qin nodded. He took the stone in his hand and sensed it. This stone contained a strange aura, but everything else was ordinary. Thinking for a moment, he placed the stone in his chest and didn't continue investigating lest something unexpected happened. Qin looked up at the surrounding area. The skies were covered in fog, and only the area where the pier was located was a gap. Further in the distance was the demon race's city. He could only see this side of it clearly, as most of it was hidden in the fog. The pier was simple and crude. It was more like a platform that was casually built with stones to temporarily anchor the mountain crab. Thinking of that large crab, Qin turned his head. Under the shadow of the ferry, he could only see its four legs comfortably breathing in and out. Here, the world was filled with extremely rich monster energy, stirring up howling winds. It was quite enjoyable to look at. The Heavenly Sea sect's ferry was able to smoothly enter and exit the Skybreak mountain range. Could this be related to this mountain crab? Qin thought for a moment. Then, he looked away and began to casually walk around the pier. There were many monsters here, and some had built stone houses to serve as shops. But there were even more that had casually placed a rag or bee skin on the ground and opened for business. Now, in front of the large and small monster stalls, there were many human cultivators surrounding them. They were cautiously and restrainedly negotiating prices. Qin encountered a long-bearded old man and a young monster. They engaged in a fierce battle of words over a relatively verdant piece of grass that didn't seem to have any other changes to it. In the end, the old man seemed to fail in his bargaining. He hesitated again and again before clenching his teeth and taking out some immortal money to complete the transaction according to the young monster's price. The old man turned and left. With his back to the young monster, the corners of his lips curved up in a smile, as if he were incomparably satisfied. Sensing Qin gaze, the old man glanced at him and immediately restrained his expression. He put on a solemn expression and walked away. Qin knew that if he wasn't wrong, this young monster who was feeling smug and thought he had earned a great deal would suffer a loss because of his age. Indeed, the older the ginger, the spicier it was. This thing didn't care about race, only age. Qin didn't poke his nose into other people's business. He continued to wander around and saw many more transactions taking place. The results left him feeling a bit more at ease. Although the monster race on the pier had some resistance towards humans, and many of them were on guard against them, there wasn't any obvious hostility towards them. Although this couldn't represent everyone, it could at least prove the attitude of a portion of the monster race. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.